Welcome back, everyone. This is your host, the DN WhatIf, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of what if Deku got a meta ability after 150 frozen years? A special shout out to the original creator, Ultimate 10. Please make sure to show your support by checking out their work from the description. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. In training, there is no winning or losing. There is only learning. Tucker Metz. From Captain America to Commander-in-Chief. Protocol, Activity Report. The first day of training under J-Piece number 1 ranked hero, All Might, has been completed. It was not what I originally expected but still proved effective given how sore I feel. I have not felt muscle fatigue like this since waking up from the ice. All Might's training plan is very extensive, consisting of hauling large amounts of trash off a local beach. How this city allowed one of their properties to get so messy I'll never know. He has informed me that there will be other exercises thrown in with the trash hauling, but has left me in the dark on it. There is much to prepare for in the coming 10 months between my physical training and extensive studying, especially with Japanese. But it is a challenge I am ready to take on. Further updates will be given in coming reports. Music, Boku no Hero Academia OST, Hero A Instrumental. Ever since the day Yagi had assigned Midoriya his mission to clean up Takoba Municipal Beach Park, the super soldier had been hard at work every morning and evening. He was very methodical and efficient in his cleaning, never wasting a step or motion. One morning, Midoriya was focusing on removing a pile of old tires. He had both arms extended with 2 large tires, each weighing 23 kilograms, 50 lbs, hanging from them. He rushed down the beach and up the stairway to deposit them in Yagi's truck. He then rushed down to repeat the process until the entire pile was removed. "Tires are removed, sir." Midoriya saluted. Yagi clicked his stopwatch, noting the 10:15 timestamp. He then looked at the large stacks of tires neatly placed in his truck. He nodded. "Not bad, soldier. Still need to be faster though?" "Yes, sir." Yagi chuckled at the vedette's antics. Even though Yagi had told him he didn't have to refer to him as sir, it appeared the U.S. Army's training was drilled deep into his head. Oh well, All Might didn't mind it. In fact, he felt giddy that the captain was addressing him in such a manner. Midoriya continued pushing and pulling old junky appliances across the beach like sleds while All Might in his muscle form would occasionally ride on them to provide extra resistance. The super soldier did not once complain and continued his task undeterred. One night, Midoriya walked into his apartment and found a small steel box with the shield logo on the side lying on the floor by the door. He picked it up and was initially surprised by its heavy weight. Laying it back down, he pulled off the top and found a set of dark green arm and ankle bands. There was a note lying by them. "Here are the training weights you requested. Our R&D were able to design and manufacture these in record time for you. Each one weighs approximately 90 kilograms, 200 pounds. Let me know when the weight gets too easy and they'll send over heavier ones. Good luck." Midoriya nodded in satisfaction. He was taking his cleanup training mission very seriously and wanted to get the most gain he possibly could. After reaching out to Coulson, a section of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s R&D manufactured a set of training weights appropriately scaled up to fit his super soldier physiology. Placing the weights on his wrists and ankles, he instantly felt the resistance. "This will do." The next evening, Midoriya was struggling to push an old pickup truck stuck in the sand. Normally, he wouldn't have much issue with a job like this. However, it was his first full day wearing the new training weights and he felt every kilogram straining his limbs. The fact that the truck's tires were flat and the back end was loaded with junk didn't make things easier either. Nonetheless, he gritted his teeth and pushed through the pain. "Surrender isn't an option, soldier. Push through. Go further beyond," he internally cried. Digging deep, he exerted even more force against the truck's back end. Yagi, meanwhile, had been watching as was about to tell Midoriya to stop before noticing the truck started to move. Slowly but surely, Midoriya managed to free the truck from the sand ruts and continued pushing it toward the seawall rampway. He blinked in mild shock before grinning in satisfaction. One night, after returning from the beach, Midoriya sat at his desk, fully engrossed in his studies. He had set times brushing up various subjects that included Japanese history, world history, math, science, and English. Right now, he was writing Japanese hiragana, katakana, and kanji in rapid repetition, drilling it into his head. He needed to write and read Japanese like it was second nature. Part of the process also included reading books written in Japanese. Later, he moved on to his two toughest subjects, Japanese and world history. Even before being iced, Midoriya's knowledge on Japanese history was very limited. Missing the last 150 years certainly didn't help either. There was a lot to catch up on. While at Mizudafu Community College, he remained steadfast and alert during classes despite his body soreness. He received the results for his first handwritten essay from his Japanese professor. 75. Not bad, but there was plenty of room for improvement. One evening, Midoriya was watching a series of YouTube channels regarding new fighting styles he could implement, specifically ninjutsu and kung fu. While YouTube wasn't the ideal way to learn these new fighting styles, it was better than nothing. Midoriya was almost surprised to learn the online video website was still around 150 years later. Perhaps he should talk to Coulson about having S.H.I.E.L.D. aid him improve his hand-to-hand combat abilities during his free time? During an evening session at the beach, Midoriya was swimming several hundred meters offshore. He was still wearing his weights, which made it exceedingly harder to stay above water, but he managed. Reaching an offshore red buoy that served as the halfway point, he began swimming back to shore. He used the offshore breakers to help propel him faster to the shore like a surfboard. Stepping out of the water with only dark green swim trunks, he breathed heavily. 1.5 miles, 2.4 kilometers, he corrected himself, in 3 minutes. Not bad. I can still be faster though, huh? Midoriya stopped when he spotted All Might in his buff form surrounded by a group of women fangirling and ogling him. Where did they come from? Are those lipstick marks on his face? Dang Toshinori. A few of the women saw Midoriya step out of the water and his chiseled muscles, tall stature, and cute handsome face immediately drew them in. Before Midoriya knew it, he was swarmed by several women with hearts in their eyes, much like All Might's predicament off to the side. Hey, you're really hot. Are you a friend of All Might's? Can I have your number? Take me. Midoriya blushed profusely and backed away, feeling very uncomfortable, especially with that last exclamation. He was never good at dealing with women in general, before or even after the procedure, especially when they were this forward. With that, he rushed back into the ocean and swam back out, leaving the women on the beach dumbfounded. While in his apartment, Midoriya opened a steel box from S.H.I.E.L.D. to reveal another set of training weights, with the exception of them being black. Reading the note, his eyes widened slightly when it stated the new weights were 180 kilograms, 396.8 pounds, apiece. Well, he sweat dropped. I was getting used to these old ones. Time to start. From square one again. Midoriya's Japanese professor handed him a recent graded essay. He smiled proudly at the result. 90, much better. But he knows he could do even better. Late at night, Midoriya sat at his work desk reading through various books. Lying to the side was a mock UA university entrance exam from years past. Studying it would help him prepare for the type of questions that would be asked. But he made it a priority to study beyond the written criteria. Prepare for the unexpected. Midoriya was strolling through Yukio Food Store, a local grocery store chain. He was filling his cart with a wide variety of food items. He was able to read Japanese clearly now without having to use his phone to translate. He held a coupon pamphlet in his free hand, scanning diligently for as many deals as possible. Just because S.H.I.E.L.D. was paying for his expenses didn't mean he would splurge money. Lifetime habits built from living off his mom's paychecks help reinforce Midoriya's value for money. Many store employees were initially appalled by the amount of food he bought. However, after sheepishly explaining how his body burned through a lot of calories, they understood. After all, there were people with quirks who had to consume more food than the average person. From that point, Midoriya became a valued customer for the Yukio food store. This didn't prevent the shocked expressions he would normally get from other shoppers. He learned to just ignore it. What can he say? A super soldier has to eat. Early one Sunday morning, Midoriya dedicated time to training his shield skills, as he called it. Technically, he was supposed to be resting on Sundays. But All Might never stated that he couldn't do any work at all on Sundays, only suggesting that he use that day to rest and recover. He didn't want to undermine Yagi's instructions, but Midoriya was good at finding loopholes. In addition, he had plenty of energy to spare and was motivated to spend as much time training as possible. He was alone at the beach, throwing his shield at several stacked items he had haphazardly set up. Rebounding off the objects, it ricocheted back to his position and smoothly caught it. Similar to a pinball game. The iconic red, white, and blue paint job was stripped off the disc, revealing its glossy silver surface. He hated to stripe the paint off, but after the incident with the sludge villain, he couldn't take any more chances of being recognized by anyone. Besides, it could always be repainted. He continued his throwing and catching exercises, burning the motions into his head. Once he was comfortable, Midoriya tried throwing and catching with his eyes closed, training himself to rely not on sight but rather his hearing as well, anticipating the shield's return by mentally calculating the time it takes to rebound off objects and come back to him. He messed up more times than not at first, but he continued training regardless. At sunrise, Midoriya was jumping, flipping, and twisting acrobatically around the beach, throwing and catching his shield with his eyes closed with pinpoint accuracy. Midoriya ran out of Mizudafu Community College at breakneck speed, startling nearby students in his path. In his satchel were his recently graded assignments. Every single paper was marked with a perfect score. He was already wearing his training clothes. He had learned he could save an extra 45 minutes by changing at the college rather than running all the way home. Every minute counts. Midoriya was running along the beach with the sun setting in the distance while All Might in his muscular form was piggybacking on him. Despite the straight from the training weights and the 255 kilos, 562 pounds, of All Might on his back, he maintained a decent pace down the beach even after running 2 miles without stopping. Wonder how my younger self would react if I told him he'd one day get a piggyback ride from Captain America? Yagi mused. Yagi watched on with a well-pleased smile as Midoriya continued racing up the stairway, hauling or pushing heavy items up the seawall rampway, tossing them into a large metal disposal container sitting on the side of the road. Yagi had rented the disposal container weeks prior when he realized he couldn't haul a load of trash in his truck before Midoriya already had several more loads ready on the street when he returned. His speed was amazing, and his pure work ethic was kind of scary if Yagi was being honest. Only his old sensei Gran Torino reminded Yagi of this kind of work ethic. Nevertheless, turning toward the beach, he was amazed by how much smaller the trash heaps were getting. At this rate, Midoriya would finish with plenty of time to spare. And music. Mizudafu, Japan, November 2196. Days had turned to weeks, and weeks had turned to months. Before Midoriya Izuku knew it, 7 months had passed since he started the cleanup project. It was an early fall morning at 3:30 a.m., and still dark outside. The only light sources came from the city and the waxing gibbous moon hovering in the sky over the sea, its light reflecting off the ocean water. Midoriya was still hard at work though, with a LED light shining from a headband on his forehead. He wore a black sweatpants, a sleeveless green camo shirt, and his red boots which were rugged and torn from overuse. He had woken up early from a stressed dream and couldn't return to sleep. With that, he decided to get an early head start on training. His body was aching and sore from overexertion, but he ignored it and persevered. His sheer will and his enhanced endurance were the only things keeping him from collapsing. No normal person could handle this type of non-stop, hardcore training. Heck, even most people with quirks couldn't handle it. Most of the trash heaps were gone, leaving smaller debris scattered across the beach. He raced across the sands in a grid pattern, gathering items into a black trash bags, filling them, and tossing them into the disposal container on the street. Rinse and repeat. Nearly an hour later, after finishing collecting all of the smaller scrap, he was now face to face with undisputedly the largest and heaviest item left on the beach, an old, broken-down bulldozer. He had no idea who left it or why it was here, but that didn't matter. The day had come for this massive rusty hunk of yellow junk to go. He looked between the bulldozer and the rampway, gauging the distance to cover to be at least 75 meters, 246 feet. He knew that pushing this yellow behemoth up the ramp would be even harder than across the sand. Clenching his fists tightly, he adopted a determined expression. He was not backing down. As Midia walked behind the dozer, he cracked his neck and rotated his arms to prepare himself. "All right, you're the last one. Time for you to go, big guy." Bending his legs forward, he pushed against the dozer. It didn't budge. After a moment of exertion, he stopped and took several deep breaths. Glancing down at the 200 kilograms, 441 pounds, bands on his wrists and legs, he inwardly debated if he should remove the weights. The verdette then shook his head at that thought. "I made it this far with the weights on. I won't take the easy route here," he internally declared. Midia pushed even harder against the bulldozer. This time, he felt the large, yellow machine move ever so slightly forward. "Come on, soldier. Keep pushing," he inwardly yelled. "Graph," he bellowed out, feeling the strain. "Further, go further. Go further." Repeating his family motto, the super soldiers dug his boots into the white sand, which shifted around his feet. Midia's fingers dug into the dozer's metal plating, causing it to contort like paper. The veins on his arms, legs, and temple throbbed madly from exertion. Despite the dozer's stubbornness, the green super soldier was not giving in. "I have to work so much harder than everyone else. Keep pushing. Go further. Plus ultra." The rusty caterpillar tracks gave way and began to slowly turn, the dozer's blade pushing sand out of the way. Loud metallic clicking and clunking sounds emanated from the machine's gears as the dozer moved for the first time in years. Yagi Tashinori was driving his white truck down a not-so-busy street. Glancing at his digital clock, it read 5:30 a.m. "Damn, can't believe I'm going to be late," he internally lamented. Hopefully Cap isn't too disappointed and understands. For the first time in months, he was running late to their training sessions. He had made it a point to be at the beach on time whenever he wasn't involved with pro-hero work or preparing for his faculty job at UA University. But after many hauls to local scrap yards, one of his tires popped en route to the beach, delaying him half an hour. After changing the tire, he was driving on the empty street that led to Takoba Municipal Beach Park. He knew Midia would already be at the beach. He always was. In fact, he suspected the super soldier was arriving even earlier than the aim to pass. American Dream Plan stated he should. Plus, given how much faster the trash piles were disappearing, he suspected he may be working on Sundays too. Days he recommended Cap should take off to recover. This left Yagi conflicted. On one hand, he was happy that Midia was pushing past his limits. On the other hand, he had finely tuned the aim-to-pass plan to ensure his progress was swift yet manageable. But he wasn't sticking to the plan. He was overworking himself. Captain America or not, as his trainer, he'd need to have a talk with young Midia. He may not know the full limits of Midia's super soldier physiology, but like with any body, it needed rest to recover. As he pulled up the beach, his eyes widened in shock at the scene in front of him. Whoa, he yelled out. Was he seeing straight? Parking the truck, Yagi ran down the sidewalk toward the stairway. Resting on the side of the street in front of the seawall stairs was the old, junky bulldozer. A trail of sand and mud was behind it, stretching down the rampway. Rhea! Standing atop of the dozer's cab was a shirtless Midia, shouting out to the heavens all full volume. As the sun rose over the horizon, its rays glistened off his sweaty, well-defined body. Rhea? Yagi's eyes widened at the spectacle. And no way. Why you pushed that thing up here all by yourself? That thing had to have weighed 4,500 kilos at least. In the sand and up the ramp? It was then that he noticed the long disposal container was full of garbage, nearly overflowing. He ran to the rails and he could have sworn he felt his jaw hit the ground. The entire beach and shoreline was clean, with no trash in sight. Holy crap, Cap! Yagi shouted in disbelief. You even cleaned outside the area I told you to? Seriously, there's not one speck of trash left on this beach? The crystal blue waves crashed against the clean, white sandy beach, the water sparkling under the morning rays of the sun. No longer a dirty hellscape, Takoba Municipal Beach Park was beautiful once more. Midoriya ceased his victorious shouting and finally noticed Yagi's arrival. Despite his fatigued state, he carefully climbed down the dozer and stood a few meters behind the haggard blonde. 3 months to spare. Please stink. Super crap, Yagi exclaimed, transforming into this buff form mid-sentence. All Might turned to face Midoriya, who straightened up and gave a salute. Sir, the mission accomplished? He panted, sweating heavily. Indeed. Well done, soldier. All Might congratulated. You pushed yourself further beyond and look at the results? All Might pulled out his smartphone, careful not to crush it in his large hands. See this? This is you 7 months ago. The image showed Midoriya on the first day of training. Taking a quick picture of Midoriya now, All Might showed him the picture. Now look at you. You've come so far. Indeed, Midoriya's body had bulked up and was more well-defined and sculpted like a Greek god, yet not too overly muscled. There wasn't an area of his body that had flab or hadn't been worked during his hardcore training sessions. It appeared he had even grown an inch in height, making him 192 centimeters tall, 6 feet 3 inches. All Might's smile brightened. I think it's safe to say you're back in fighting shape, Captain. Midoriya gave the number 1 pro a tired smile. Actually, I think I'm stronger than I was. Thank you, All Might. For everything. He spoke in fluent Japanese. Months of practice, repetition, and listening had finally paid off. Haha. The blonde giant laughed heartily. It was your hard work, soldier. Not mine. Catching his breath, Midoriya couldn't help but ask, what now, sir? The cleanup mission is accomplished, and we still have 3 months to spare until the exam. All Might didn't immediately respond. Should he finally tell Captain about the secret of his quirk? Ask if he would be willing to inherit one for all? After all, with his physique and enhanced physiology, Midoriya would be the perfect vessel for one for all. He dare say Midoriya would be able to use it at full power right off the bat as he once did. No. Now's not the time. Yagi inwardly decided. Besides, he doesn't need my power to get into UA. He'll be just fine for now. Besides, there are other things we can work on till then. Haha. All Might laughed. Well, I'll tell you what you're not going to be doing. For the next week, you are forbidden from any physical training, Captain. Yes, sir? Midoriya blinked, confused. You haven't been sticking to the plan. You overworked yourself, didn't you? The blonde hero asked, cocking a brow. I suspect you were working on Sundays too, yes? When you should have been resting. That's partially why you're 3 months ahead of schedule. Midoriya frowned and nodded in confirmation, not wanting to be dishonest with the pro who dedicated his time to training him. Yes. Apologies, All Might, sir. Wanted to go the extra mile. All Might shrunk down to his skinny form, his clothing becoming baggy. I wish you had told me. I could have adjusted your plan. But still, rest and recovery is important. Yagi laid a hand on the vedette's shoulder. Please, take a week off from training. Focus on your studies. Enjoy some downtime. Let your body recover. That's an order, by the way. A small smile graced Midoriya's face as he nodded. Yes, understood, sir. A week from now, meet me at the front of your college at 1700 hours sharp. Yagi instructed with a smirk. We'll get started on combat training then. Combat training, sir? Midoriya blinked. Yagi resumed his muscular form and laughed boisterously. Indeed. You'll have to face faux villains in the entrance exam. What better way to prepare you than sparring with an old pro? Ha! Midoriya could not argue with that logic. It made perfect sense. He'd get more out of fighting an actual opponent than a punching bag or something. However, images of All Might blowing away the sludge guy and changing the freaking weather with a single punch played through his mind. He was going to have to spar with this guy. Granted, All Might would likely be holding back a lot, but still. What the crap? Midoriya internally cursed. Let's see. It should be around this corner, a teenage girl murmured to herself, glancing down at her pink phone for directions to the nearest local library. She was a short, curvy girl standing 168 centimeters tall, 5 feet 5 inches, with brown hair that was tied into a short messy ponytail with 2 long strands framing her face and short bangs on her forehead. She was fair-skinned and appeared to have a cute perpetual blush on her cheeks. Her eyes were large and round warm brown irises that radiate warmth. She was currently wearing her new school's uniform that hugged her frame, which was a traditional white sailor fuku. It consisted of white sailor shirt with a navy blue sailor collar and red tie, a navy skirt, black leggings, and brown shoes. Strapped to her back was a black book bag. Now, Uraraka Ochako would be lying if she said she wasn't feeling a tad nervous. It had only been a week ago she had to say goodbye to her parents after they helped her unpack all of her things into her new apartment. It was such a foreign thought that she was still trying to process. Her parents' construction company had been contracted to help construct a new apartment complex that just opened up at the start of the year. After construction concluded, tenants were needed and her family had been offered a great deal for an open room. To make it better, the location was close enough for anyone living there to attend UA University with relative ease. UA University did have some dormitories available on campus, but the cost of tuition to attend UA was already high. Adding dormitory fees was too much for Uraraka's family to pay, even after their last big job. The only reason her parents could afford to send her to UA University in the first place was because they had been putting money back into a savings account since she was a little girl, when she made her desire to become a hero known. UA did offer scholarships for those who placed in the top 3 of the regular entrance exam. She knew it was a long shot, but Uraraka was studying and training hard in hopes of potentially securing one of those spots. It would certainly alleviate the financial burden from her parents and herself for living and school supplies. Uraraka had always planned to be ready to live by herself if she made it to UA, but for it to suddenly happen during her 3rd year of high school was a lot to take in. There was always the chance she wouldn't pass the entrance exam too. However, if she was going to become a hero and ensure her parents lived happy financial stable lives, she couldn't let this opportunity slip past her. After talking it over with her parents, they agreed to jump on an opening at the complex. In a flurry of leases and school transfer paperwork, she now had her own place. Alone. Uraraka shook her head, not wanting to dwell on that thought, and refocused on her current task in finding the library. Earlier that afternoon, her new history teacher had assigned the class a project covering famous historical figures, but no one could cover the same person. History wasn't exactly her best subject, but she was elated that no one had picked her favorite old pro hero. After doing some quick research on her phone, she found a book online covering her hero in good detail, at least what was publicly known about them. However, it appeared her school library didn't have it. This was why she was currently en route to one of the local libraries near her apartment in hopes it was available. Turning a corner, she smiled when she spotted the building down the street. After walking to the building and up the stairway through the front doors, she was impressed by how much bigger it looked on the inside. There were 3 floors with giant bookshelves everywhere. Her hometown library was like a closet compared to this place. Stepping to the front desk where the librarian sat, Uraraka politely asked, "Excuse me, you wouldn't happen to have the book? What was it? Dawn of Quirks in the 21st Century, would you?" She hoped she remembered the name correctly. The older lady hummed, "It sounds familiar. One moment please." The librarian searched for the book on her computer and looked back to Uraraka with a smile. "Yes. It's on the 2nd floor in row I, one of the middle shelves, dear." "Thank you." With a polite bow, she headed off to the stairway to the side. After navigating to the correct row, Uraraka was scanning the shelves. Okay, it has to be here. Her eyes lit up when she spotted her target. As she reached for the book, someone else's hand reached for it as well. "Oh, my apologies. I didn't see you there." The other hand belonged to a tall teenage girl standing at 173 centimeters, 5 feet 8 inches, with a buxom physique. She had long black hair styled into a spiky ponytail with a large strand hanging on the right side of her face. She had smooth skin with thin, sharp eyes and gray irises paired with short eyebrows. Aside from the other girl being 15 centimeters taller and her body being more curvaceous, she wasn't jealous. Uraraka noted her fancy white blouse, black shorts, black stockings, and knee-high brown boots that appeared to be from an expensive brand. Slung over her right shoulder was a fancy red bag that also appeared to be expensive. Uraraka blinked twice and waved her hands apologetically. It's okay. I wasn't paying attention either. Yaozu Momo pulled the book off the shelf, showing it to Uraraka. You were reaching for this one, yes? The book's cover illustrated a man wearing a patriotic-themed uniform with a dark backdrop. The sun was rising over the horizon. The Dawn of Quirks in the 21st Century, The Sentinel of Liberty by Todoroki J. Uraraka nodded. Yeah. I need it for a school project? She rubbed her neck sheepishly. If that's the case, here, Yaoyorozu kindly handed her the book. I was only going to use it for reference material in a story, but it can wait. You need it much more than I do. Thank you so much. Uraraka said gratefully. Out of curiosity, the Ravenet spoke quietly, trying not to disturb other people. Is the school project about the Dawn of Quirks era? It's about historical figures, actually. Captain America is who I chose. Uraraka replied happily. I see. From my understanding, this book does have a good amount of information on him, even primary and secondary sources from people who knew him and were affected by him. Yaoyorozu tilted her head in a cute manner. Did you choose him simply because he's the first hero by chance? She shook her head. No, not just that. People forget he was also considered the original rescue hero by many. Uraraka said cheerfully. And rescuing is my passion. Yaoyorozu smiled softly at the brunette's reply. She then took notice of two little chibi accessories hanging from her bag. One was of 13 and the second was Captain America. She must be a real fan. He is certainly a good choice. You can't go wrong with him, the tall beauty acknowledged. Thank you for letting me take the book, by the way. Uraraka bowed politely. Oh, it's no trouble at all. She waved off kindly. My family can order a copy for our private library. So please, no need to fret. Wait, her own library? Is her family rich or something? Uraraka internally cried. Getting over her inner shock, the brunette then recalled something the Ravenet had said earlier. You said you were writing a story? Was it about Captain America too? Asked curiously. Oh, why yes. Yaoyorozu looked away, looking embarrassed. Well, it's a historical fiction, a bit of romance. Nothing serious though. Just something I do for fun in my downtime. Oh. Uraraka cocked a brow, intrigued. Like a fanfiction or a serious book? I may be prying now that I think about it. It's none of my business to dash. Uraraka couldn't complete her thought when Yaoyorozu immediately responded. Oh, it's just a fanfiction online. I wouldn't dream of this actually being published one day. Oh, I see. Uraraka responded. Wait a minute. Historical fiction? Romance? Fanfiction? Her eyes widened slightly when a possible answer occurred to her. No, it couldn't be that one, right? But what else could it be? I don't know anything else like it. Well, if that's all you needed, I'll just be going over here to look for some more reference material. Yaoyorozu said, walking past Uraraka. It was a pleasure talking dash. Your story wouldn't happen to be Save the Date, would it? Uraraka asked bluntly. Yaoyorozu squeaked, freezing in place. No way. How'd she figure that out? I was sure I kept it vague enough. The Ravenet turned back with a cute blush. Maybe. Yaoyorozu was surprised when the brunette's expression brightened as her eyes sparkled in excitement. You're really the incredible Yamamo? Uraraka whispered excitedly. Oh my gosh. I'm a big fan of your work. Ah, really? Yaoyorozu stammered lightly, not expecting this reaction at all. Why, you read it? Of course. Uraraka couldn't contain her excitement. I keep up with every update, and I've read through your story 3 times now, at least what you have so far. It's really good writing. Yaoyorozu blushed at the genuine praise to her story. Oh, thank you. Oh. Reaching into her skirt pocket, Uraraka quickly pulled out her phone. Here. I've actually made some fan art for your story for a while now. Why you did? Yaoyorozu blinked in surprise. For the next few minutes, Uraraka showed an intrigued Yaoyorozu some artwork she had done for her story. Most of it consisted of the main female lead being held, hugged, or kissed by Captain America, bringing a blush to Yaoyorozu's face. There were some pieces of the female lead riding with Captain on his motorcycle. This is all really good. She complimented. Why, you're a really good artist. Uraraka chuckled sheepishly. I'm an amateur at best. No. Really, this is all good. Yaoyorozu insisted. It really is amazing to see these scenes on paper than just in my imagination. Uraraka blushed at the praise, and lightly gasped when realizing she had been talking to this girl for a while, and had not introduced herself. I'm Uraraka Ochako, she extended her hand. A pleasure to meet you. Yaoyorozu Momo, the Ravenet gently shook her head. The sentiment is shared. From there, Uraraka and Yaoyorozu walked around the library quietly conversing with each other, careful to not disturb other people as the latter gathered a few other WW3 and Captain America-related books and articles. Uraraka was impressed by how dedicated the Ravenet was to ensure she was historically accurate in her story, for the most part. She did take creative liberties with the time-traveling detective and her romance with the captain, after all. After checking out her books, the two girls walked out of the library together and down the steps. Their conversation had since shifted to another important topic. So, Uraraka-san, do you plan on attending any university after high school? Yaoyorozu asked. Actually, I'm hoping to attend UA Academy next semester. I'll be taking the entrance exam in 3 months, so, she grinned nervously and crossed her fingers crossed. I'm sure you'll do fine. I'm planning to attend UA as well. Yaoyorozu then looked away bashfully. I have received many recommendations, so I'll be taking the recommendations entrance exam a week before the regular exams. Uraraka almost tripped from this news. Whoa, really? That's so cool, Yaoyorozu-san. It's really not a big deal, Yaoyorozu tried to play off. Are you enrolling in the hero course? Uraraka asked. Stepping off the concrete stairs, the two girls walked down the relatively quiet sidewalk together. I am, the Ravenet nodded. My quirk is very suitable for heroics. It just makes sense. Oh, what is your quirk? Uraraka was intrigued. For Yaoyorozu to be recommended means she must have had an impressive quirk. Creation. I can convert the lipids of my body into any inorganic material as long as I understand its molecular structure. Yaoyorozu explained. Uraraka's eyes lit up. That sounds really cool. Does that mean you can make something like, I don't know, a car? I've never tried making a car before. But as long as I have plenty of lipids and know the molecular structure of every component and how they go together, I could do it. Yaoyorozu replied. That's awesome. No wonder you got recommended. What about you, Uraraka-san? What's your quirk? Yaoyorozu inquired curiously. Zero gravity. She held up her hands to show her calloused fingertips. If I touch something with all 5 fingers, I can remove gravity's effect on it, making it weightless? That's impressive. Yaoyorozu complimented. I can think of so many uses for it. I'm sure you'll make a great pro hero with that ability. Thanks. She rubbed the back of her head sheepishly. That's my goal, at least. And to make sure my parents never have to worry about money ever again, Uraraka mentally noted. Let's see, Yaoyorozu stopped to examine her surroundings. I believe my ride should be picking me up on the opposite end of this block. They should be here soon. Her ride? Does she mean her parents? Mind if I walk with you then? Uraraka offered kindly. If you have nowhere to be, then yes, I'd be grateful for your company, Uraraka-san. Yaoyorozu smiled. Yaoyorozu couldn't remember the last time she had a friendly conversation with another person her age. Though she was thankful for the advanced learning she received at home from the private tutors her parents hired, it made forming friendships a bit challenging. But so far, she seemed to be doing good, right? How about we cut through here? Uraraka pointed to an empty alley to their right. It looks like it cuts through to the other side. Yaoyorozu nodded. With that, the two girls walked into the alley continuing their conversation. However, unbeknownst to them, a group of shady individuals had seen the girls walk into the alley alone. With no witnesses, pro-heroes and police around, the group promptly pursued after the girls. Midoriya sighed deeply, feeling exasperated. Our history assignment just had to be over World War III. Not anything from the last century that could be interesting, it had to be the war. He inwardly bemoaned. He turned a corner and headed in the direction of his local library. Like any assignment regarding historical events, he needed to cite his sources, meaning he needed to check out books covering the Third War. He really didn't need it for obvious reasons, but he was trying to make a new life for himself, so writing a detailed and very accurate report over his past experiences may not be the best idea. It had been 4 days since All Might had barred him from any physical training, with the exception of his wrist and ankle weights. However, he'd already gotten accustomed to those by now. When he wasn't doing college work, he spent time going through his things to catch up on notebook. Even with the extra free time, he only got through 2 pages from the list. There was that much. Even with the 2 complete pages, he still felt like he was significantly behind on the times. The verdette looked ahead and spotted a few guys rushing into an alleyway ahead of him. They looked like they were in high school. With keen hearing, Midoriya inadvertently overheard the guys conversing. "You see those babes? They were smoking hot. Hurry up. Don't let 'em get away. Relax, it's a dead end where they're going. Nowhere to hide. At least we'll have some privacy." Midoriya's eyes widened, feeling a pit form in his stomach. Looking around, he didn't see any pro-heroes or police in sight but knew he couldn't stand around and wait when a serious crime was about to take place. Without hesitation, he quickly sprinted into action, but not before pulling out his phone first. "Ah crud," Uraraka complained as she and Yaoyorozu approached a dead-end brick wall. Sorry, I thought this would cut through." My bad." Yaoyorozu shook her head and smiled reassuringly. "It's alright. You didn't dash." She paused when 4 guys running down the alley stopped in front of them. "Oh no. Where'd they come from?" Uraraka thought worriedly. Yaoyorozu, though remained calm outwardly, felt a jolt of anxiety as well. This can't be good. The perverse leers the men were directing at them only confirmed their intentions to both young ladies. Hey ladies." One of the men stepped forward with a smug smirk. The ringleader. "No need for violence." "Hey, what do you guys want?" Uraraka asked with an edge in her voice. Easy, he held out his hands placately. "We just like to talk and get to know each other. You're both fine ladies. I'm afraid we're not interested." Yaoyorozu pulled out a can of pepper spray to defend herself and Uraraka-san. "Now please move aside." Yaoyorozu suddenly felt the can yanked out of her hand from a strange force. The pepper spray flew through the air and into one of the hooligan's hands. "No need for that." He tossed it to the side. Was that a telekinetic quirk? Or perhaps magnetism? Yaoyorozu immediately pondered. "Please try not to fight back, girls." The leader sneered. "Just cooperate and we can all walk away from this feeling satisfied." Knowing what the creep was implying, Yaoyorozu and Uraraka both felt cold shivers race down their spines. "Should we use our quirks, Yaoyorozu-san?" Uraraka whispered. The Ravenette shook her head. "No, not yet. We're not licensed. We can only use them in self-defense. Remember, you..." "Oh, that's right." Uraraka recalled that UA University did extensive background checks on hero department applicants. If she and Yaoyorozu used their quirks first, they'd be breaking the law and then have no chance of getting in. "This is my fault. I'm the one who led us here without knowing the area better." "Stupid Luchako." She berated herself. Now, the leader sauntered forward, every step oozing with wicked intent. "Why don't we start off slow and get to know each other first? Pretty sure you're coming on way too strong, guys." A new voice spoke up. The group turned to find a tall, green-haired young man wearing a dark brown leather jacket with black trim over a green and white plaid button shirt, dark blue jeans, and a pair of red ankle-high boots with black laces and white heels. A yellow satchel was slung over his right shoulder. "I'm no expert with women or anything, but I'm pretty sure that's the absolute worst way to make a good impression," he remarked dryly. "Hey, beat it," one exclaimed, annoyed. "We ain't causing trouble," another added. "We're just talking." Midoriya glanced at the 2 girls, taking note of their apprehensive expressions. the look in their eyes refuting the guy's claim and practically begging him to help. Those two ladies don't seem interested. Midoriya hardened his gaze. Now, walk away and we can forget this ever happened, guys. No need for trouble. Oh, trying to play a hero, huh? The leader turned and walked up to Midoriya. The verdette was around 45 centimeters taller, 1.5 feet, than him and his boys and was annoyed he had to strain his neck up to look him in the eyes. But height and physical strength didn't mean much when faced with quirks, he thought. He then held out his right hand which had sharp black talons oozing with yellowish liquid. See this? It's deadly, one little cut is all it takes. Some kind of poison ability, huh? Midoriya immediately presumed. This is your last chance to walk away, tough guy. He sneered and flashed his teeth, trying to look intimidating. Wouldn't want to make a mess now, would we? Midoriya, undeterred, flashed a confident smirk. I was about to say the same thing. With a growl, the high schooler raised his arm back to slash his poison-dripped claws across Midoriya's face. In swift motion, the verdette grabbed the punk's wrist in a vice-like grip and delivered a quick jab into his left side, causing him to bend over in pain. With a quick, strong chop to the neck, the teenager collapsed to the ground unconscious. Better to knock him out right away than risk getting slashed with poison, Midoriya mentally noted. The nearest guy gave a surprised yell before rushing at Midoriya, who was already ready. The verdette blocked and parried his wild punches and swings. Jabbing him in the throat and stunning him, Midoriya delivered a swift kick into the attacker's abdomen and careening back into the wall with a loud thud. Bastard! Another pulled out a knife from his pocket and aimed it at Midoriya's throat. Yaoyorozu and Uraraka both gasped in fear, the former preparing to use her quirk to make a weapon to stop the attacker but realized she wouldn't be fast enough. Midoriya, however, grabbed the attacker's wrist and squeezed on a pressure point, causing them to instantly drop the blade. With a punch to the face, he held back considerably. The teen dropped to the ground with a bloody nose and disoriented. Big mistake, bro. The last teen didn't charge Midoriya like his compatriots. Instead, he stayed back and directed his hands to the side. Midoriya was momentarily confused until noticing a nearby trash can start to levitate and then shoot towards him at incredible speed. With quick reflexes, he sidestepped the incoming object and grabbed the lid as the can itself slammed into the wall with crunch. While twisting his body back around, he swung the metal lid like his shield. The high schooler was too slow to react as the lid hit him in the temple hard. He saw stars in his vision while tumbling backwards to the ground in a pained daze. In less than 10 seconds, the four teens were either knocked out or disorientated. From Midoriya's perspective, their age showed as they were sloppy and lacked tact. Even with two of them using their quirks, defeating them wasn't an issue. Midoriya snapped his head to the two girls, who were looking at him in surprise. Come on. While they're down, let's go. Snapping out of her stupor, Yaoyorozu grabbed Uraraka's wrist and pulled her forward. Midoriya let the girls run past him before taking one last glance at the high schoolers lying on the ground before following the girls. They ran out of the alley and back on the sidewalk where there were more people present before coming to a stop. You both okay? Midoriya asked, concerned. Regaining their bearings, Yaoyorozu and Uraraka both nod in confirmation. Wise. Thank you, the former replied with a bow. Yeah, I'm okay too. Thank you so much. For saving us. Uraraka gave a grateful bow. It was no big deal. I'm just glad I was able to be here before anything bad happened. Yes, Yaoyorozu adopted a concerned expression, though despite your good intentions, it was risky for you to step in like that. You would have broken the law had you thrown the first punch, or worse had used your quirk first. Midoriya's smile never wavered as he pulled out his phone from his shirt pocket, turning it around to reveal he had the video record mode activated. It's okay. I got it covered. Right on cue, a police car pulled up beside the trio and a couple officers stepped out. They both wore blue button-up shirts with a protective vest over the top. One of the officers was a lean man and had the head of a gingery tabby cat with big yellow eyes. Much to Uraraka's amusement, he even had a golden bell on his neck. Are you the one who called in the assault in progress? The cat officer, Tamakawa Sansa, asked. Midoriya nodded. Yeah. For guys around high school age cornered these two in that alley. They can give you their testimonies, and I also have this for video evidence. He held up his phone to the policeman, or oi police cat. They used quirks against us. Later, after giving their report and watching the 4 teens hauled off in the squad car, the trio walked together down the street to Yayarozu's pickup point on a street corner. Yayarozu and Uraraka were both relieved that neither they nor the guy who helped them would be getting into legal trouble. Speaking of whom, thank you again for your help. Yayarozu bowed. You're welcome. Really though, it was no biggie. Midoriya waved off. It is a biggie. Uraraka sternly interjected. Not very many people would have stepped in like that. And be calm and rational enough to call the police and record the event for evidence. The Ravenette beauty added. That was sound thinking on your part. You're a hero. Uraraka stated proudly. Midoriya smiled fondly at that as many old memories flooded back to him. You were amazing. How you took down those jerks like nothing. It was so cool. Uraraka started doing a punching motion with her right arm, a habit of hers when she was really excited. Thank you. He rubbed the nape of his neck sheepishly. Oh. Yayarozu's eyes widened in realization. We didn't get your name. Midoriya held out his hand. Midoriya Izuku. Yayarozu Momo. Hi. I'm Uraraka Ochako. He shook both of their hands, ignoring how soft they felt. Pleased to meet you both. By the way, what happened? Why were those guys chasing you? Uraraka looked away, feeling slightly embarrassed. Well, that might have been partially my fault. The brunette quickly explained that she had led her and Yayarozu down the alleyway to cut across without knowing beforehand if it actually did. Midoriya nodded in understanding. I see. Just the wrong place, wrong time. But yeah, maybe don't go down strange alleyways anymore, Uraraka-san? You're telling me? Uraraka sighed in defeat. Lesson learned. Yayarozu looked at the taller, green-haired young man intently. You handled yourself pretty well even though you were outnumbered 4-1. Well, I have been training to hopefully get into UA's hero department this coming semester. So, I would hope I could stand my ground against some back-alley thugs. Midoriya chuckled bashfully. Both Yayarozu and Uraraka's eyes widened slightly at this revelation. Oh wow. You're trying out for the UA hero course too? Uraraka leaned closer to Midoriya with excited eyes. What a coincidence, so are we. She's so close. The verdette tried to keep his composure as the cute brunette leaned into his personal space. Did she not realize how close she was? How close her chest was to him. Oh? That is pretty cool, he stammered, unable to suppress a small blush. I really need to stop clamming up around beautiful women. Noticing Midoriya's flustered state, Yayarozu gently pulled Uraraka back. I'm curious, what is your quirk, Midoriya-san? She asked politely. Is it related to how you took down those hoodlums so quickly? It's nothing special. Just an augmentation-type quirk. The verdette rubbed his neck awkwardly, trying to play it off. Every aspect of my body is enhanced. That's partially why I was able to beat those guys so fast. Of course, they were also amateurs that didn't have any real fighting skills. Don't sell yourself short, Uraraka argued. That sounds like a really neat power. I see, you said every aspect of your body is augmented. That would include your reaction time and mental processing too, correct? Yayarozu cupped her chin in a cute thinking pose. Why yeah, actually. Midoriya nodded, impressed by her on-point deduction. Before the conversation could continue, a fancy black limousine pulled up next to them. Oh, this is my ride. Must be from a wealthy family. Midoriya presumed. I knew she had to be rich. Uraraka inwardly shouted. An idea then crossed the heiress's smart brain. She realized it may be a long shot, but it didn't hurt to ask, right? Before I go, I have an idea. She looked at both Uraraka and Midoriya hopefully. Since all three of us are going to get into UA, perhaps we can get together for a study session sometime? She had been expecting the two to give a valid excuse or reason that would prevent them from meeting up again, or flat-out decline. After all, they didn't need any potential distractions from. Sure. Uraraka happily agreed. Midoriya nodded. I'd like that too. Can't be too prepared after all. Really? Yaoyorozu was momentarily surprised by their responses, but her face immediately brightened in elation. Okay, let's exchange contact information and we can plan out a time. Pulling out their phones, the trio quickly exchanged numbers and waved Yaoyorozu off as she drove away in the limousine. Midoriya turned to the brunette, smiling. Do you live close by, Uraraka-san? I could walk you home if you want? Just to be safe. Actually, Uraraka lightly blushed. After what happened, I would feel better walking home with someone. She bowed politely. Thank you, Midoriya-san. It's okay. I'm happy to do it. He truthfully replied. It's not far from here. Follow me, Mr. Hero. Midoriya chuckled as she led the way. Midoriya and Uraraka walked down the sidewalk in comfortable silence. A moment passed and the verdette thought he could break the ice with the kind brunette. So, Uraraka-san, you're trying out for UA next semester. Does that mean you're going to a local school right now? Midoriya asked, curious. Uraraka nodded. Yeah. I'm attending Crate High School just a few blocks from here. Just transferred there last week actually. Oh, where are you originally from? Mie Prefecture. Just outside Yokkaichi. Remembering Japan's layout, he calculated her home was at least a 3-hour bullet train ride away. Long way from home, huh? Yeah. She hung her head low and slightly frowned. It's different being far from my parents. Seeing her distress, Midoriya wanted to change topics immediately but wasn't sure how to transition. However, Uraraka surprised him when her demeanor did an immediate 180. But it'll be worth it when I get into UA and become a full-fledged pro hero one day. Uraraka adopted a determined smile while clenching a fist. So, I can bear being away from my folks for a while. So, you're in a new area on your own, going to a new school, and trying out for UA's entrance exam? Midoriya summarized. Looks like you and I are in the same boat. Oh? Uraraka looked at him, curious. Where are you from, Midoriya-san? I was born here in Mizudafu, but my mom and I moved to America when I was 3 for personal reasons. Midoriya answered, keeping his answer vague in that regard. Just recently moved back at the beginning of the year to prepare for the entrance exam and improve my Japanese too. I didn't learn much of it growing up, so I had plenty of catching up to do. You lived in America? That's cool. Uraraka smiled widely. Funny that you mentioned that cause I thought I heard a bit of an accent in your voice. Not that it's bad or anything. I think it's kinda cute. No. She waved her hands around, becoming more flustered. You're speaking really well is what I'm trying to say. She finally settled. Thanks. He smiled awkwardly. I've been practicing really hard. Glad to know it's working. Way to go, Ochako. You totally embarrassed yourself. She mentally chided. What local school are you attending, Midoriya-san? She inquired, desperately wanting to move on from her embarrassing moment. Just the Mizudafu Community College. Nothing fancy or anything. He shrugged nonchalantly. Community college? Guess he must be a little older than me? Uraraka inwardly mused. Attending college already? How old are you? I'm 22. He answered. Well, biologically speaking, that's true. Okay, he's not too much older. I mean, I'll be 18 in December. So, sneaking a glance at her slightly older green-haired companion, she noted how handsome and cute he was. The way his clothes hugged his body subtly showed off his impressive physique beneath. It caused her blush marks to turn redder. Stop it. She mentally scolded herself. Remember, you're here for your parents. Not to get distracted by cute, hot guys. You okay, Uraraka-san? Midoriya inquired, noticing the brunette's reddening face. Was she unwell? Yep. Totally fine. Uraraka frantically responded. Midoriya blinked twice before nodding, deciding to take her word for it. As the two continued, Midoriya recognized the path they were walking. It was the same path he often took to his apartment. Did she live in another complex or house close by? Much to his surprise, she stopped at the entrance to the Ender apartment complex. Well, this is where I'm staying. Uraraka turned to him. Thank you for walking me here. I hope to see you soon, Midoriya-san. I actually live here too. Midoriya chortled lightly. Uraraka's eyes shot open in shock. Wait, seriously? What building and floor? Building A on floor 3. Room 333 if you can believe it. Uraraka's shock intensified. No way. I'm on the same floor. Room 337. That means we're practically neighbors, Midoriya-san. She smiled brightly. Really? Midoriya blinked in mild surprise. That was a crazy coincidence. Interesting. That is pretty cool. Did you just move in recently? He asked. I don't remember seeing you around. Yeah, I just moved in this past week. Uraraka answered. My family couldn't ignore the good deals this place had, and it was close enough to Crate High School and UA. Good deals, huh? Could S.H.I.E.L.D. be responsible for that? He snapped out of musings before he started mumbling hypotheticals aloud. Midoriya nodded. I get that. It's difficult to pass up on a good deal. He and his mother were never wealthy and had to be responsible with money, so he could understand where Uraraka was coming from. I've been here several months now, and I think you'll like it all right here. Good safe area that is patrolled daily by the pros, and you'll find deals at Yukio's close by. Neighbors are respectful too, he assured her. That's good to hear. Uraraka sighed, sounding relieved. Plus, I feel better knowing there'll be someone like you living a few doors away, Midoriya-san. Thank you, Midoriya lightly stammered. They walked together up the stairs to the 3rd floor and stopped in the corridor before arriving at their respective rooms. Well, I've got to get started on my schoolwork, Uraraka said. Yes, same here. Midoriya nodded. Try not to be a stranger, Midoriya-san. Maybe we can both help each other out with our studies? Her eyes then darted away bashfully. Or maybe just hang out? Midoriya smiled at her bubbly aura and could have sworn he felt his face get a tad warmer. Her perpetual blush spots were just too adorable. The verdette was also happy that he had a potential friend living close by that wasn't just a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent assigned to watch over him. Was this another step in making real friends with other people around his age? He hoped so. Yeah, I'd like that. An idea then occurred to him. Hey, if you want, I could show you around the neighborhood sometime? Uraraka's expression somehow brightened. Yeah, that sounds great. Maybe we can go tomorrow if you're not busy? I'm not. He shook his head. Sweet. Looking forward to it. Well, I'll see ya then, Midoriya-san. You too, Uraraka-san. With that, the two parted ways. As Midoriya walked into his room, his eyes then shot open in realization and slapped his forehead in frustration. I totally forgot to go to the library to get those books, didn't I? The next day around mid-afternoon, Midoriya was showing Uraraka around their neighborhood. 2 hours had passed, and he had already shown her several cafes, an arcade, and the local Yukio food store he frequently visited that had many good deals, which she was grateful for. Uraraka was wearing a casual outfit that consisted of a zip-up pink hoodie jacket, baggy tan shorts that reached to her mid-thighs, and black tights with pink shoes. Her hair was done up in a side bun to the left with 2 strands framing her face. Meanwhile, Midoriya was wearing a plain white shirt with the English word for t-shirt printed on the front with his brown leather jacket over it, blue jeans, and his red boots. Currently, they were both strolling the sidewalk running alongside Takoba Municipal Beach Park. Several people could be seen either jogging or lounging in chairs by the shoreline. Several signs were set up all around, demanding citizens pick up their trash. Ya no, Uraraka touched her chin thoughtfully. After I moved here, I thought I read somewhere online how dirty this beach was, but it was cleaned up recently? Is that right? She looked to Midoriya for confirmation. Yeah, that's right. Midoriya replied. Who do you think could have done it? She asked, tilting her head curiously. No one has taken credit for it, so who can say? He shrugged. Ooh, maybe it was a new local pro hero or sidekick? But it's kind of weird that whoever it was hasn't spoken up about it, don't ya think? Uraraka wondered. I mean, all that work, and they won't get any credit for it? Well, hero agencies are usually too busy with more important stuff to do a big cleanup project. Midoriya pointed out. It's possible it could have been a resident or a local group who just wanted to see the beach clean again and didn't want any media attention. But that's just my theory. That'd be pretty cool, she commented, grinning. I mean, whoever did all that cleaning isn't bragging about it or seeking any praise. They just did it because it was the right thing to do. It's kind of inspirational though. Midoriya nodded in agreement, smiling. Yeah, I guess it is. Going past the beach, they walked further into the city for Midoriya to show Uraraka other areas of the neighborhood. He even told her which alleys she could use for shortcuts and which ones she should actively avoid, bringing an embarrassed blush to her face, but she was thankful regardless. As they walked in comfortable silence, Uraraka decided to strike up another conversation with her guide. Midoriya had been sweet and friendly since meeting him, and she wanted to get to know him better. Hey, Midoriya-san. Yes, Uraraka-san? He turned to her. I was wondering if you'd tell me more about yourself. Uraraka smiled. You've been giving me such a wonderful tour so far, but you haven't said much outside of that. Oh, well, there isn't much to say, he replied bashfully. She shook her head in denial. I don't believe that. Her smile brightened. You said you lived in America most of your life, right? Why don't you tell me about that? What was it like living abroad? Let's see. He paused momentarily to collect his thoughts, trying to be careful in how he responded. My mom and I lived in a town called Fresno in the state of California, 4 hours away from Los Angeles. She moved there because the cost of living was a bit cheaper. We didn't have a whole lot of money growing up, but it was still nice nonetheless. I suppose kind of like me? Uraraka thought. See? I'm already interested. What was it like there? Did you have many friends? How about your mom? Is she still in Fresno while you're attending school here? She eagerly asked. Midoriya's expression faltered as his shoulders slumped and looked at the ground. Hey, what's the matter? Uraraka noticed his mood change and became worried. Did I say something wrong? I'm sorry if I did. Oh no. He gave her a sad smile, shaking his head. It's fine, it's just, what? I didn't have many friends growing up. Actually, I only had one, and they're no longer around. He looked down again, his smile fading. As for my well, Uraraka wasn't sure what Midoriya was trying to say, but knew it was apparently very distressing for him. Strange. How could he not have many friends? He seems like a cool guy. And what about his mom and his friend? Did something really bad happen? She worriedly thought. She placed her hand gently on the young man's shoulder, trying to comfort him. Disappointed that her attempt at conversation had made her new friend sad, she apologized. Hey, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you sad. It's all right. You didn't know. He let out a sorrowful sigh. I guess I'm still learning to move on. The zero-gravity girl wanted to help the Verdette boy but didn't want to push him into talking about something uncomfortable. After all, she had only just met him yesterday, it wouldn't be fair. So, she instead reached up and gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze, causing him to look back at her face, and she smiled at him. Hey, it's okay, Midoriya-san. You don't have to talk about it, but if you ever do, I'm all ears. Okay? Midoriya's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Uraraka was very kind. It reminded him of her, in a way. Thank you, Uraraka-san. No problem. And you can just call me Uraraka, if you want? She gave him a warm smile. I mean, what are friends for? Friends? He was taken a bit off guard. She chuckled. Of course. I mean, I know we just met yesterday, but I'd like it if we could be friends. What about you? Friends? Midoriya briefly closed his eyes and a handful of people immediately came to mind. People that he would trust with his life, and most of them were not alive anymore. It made him want to tear up, but he stopped himself, not wanting to worry the brunette any further. It would be nice to have that again. He opened his eyes and gave Uraraka a smile. Yeah, I'd like that, and you can call me Midoriya, if you want. Uraraka smiled back at him, glad she'd made him happy and that they were comfortable enough to drop suffixes around each other. Before she could respond, both of their phones vibrated in their pockets. Pulling them out, they saw that Yaoyorozu had messaged them both in a group text. Yaoyorozu, hey, this is Yaoyorozu from yesterday. If both of you are still interested, we could meet up at the same library this coming Saturday afternoon? Let me know if this time doesn't work for you. Uraraka looked back to Midoriya and smiled. I think Yaoyorozu-san wouldn't mind being your friend too. 2 pretty girls wanting to be my friend? Things certainly have changed. Midoriya inwardly mused. Uraraka, hey Yaoyorozu. I'm free then. Midoriya, I'm free that afternoon too. Yaoyorozu, excellent. I look forward to seeing you both again. Thank you again. Midoriya and Uraraka both smiled at that. As they put their phones away, he noticed that Uraraka's phone was a pink, older model smartphone, several models behind the latest. Even though it was the year 2196, cell phone technology had not changed much in the last 150 years. Midoriya discovered that many technologies not quirk-related had not progressed hardly any since his time. On one hand, it made the technological aspect of his transition for this era more manageable. On the other hand, it was disappointing to learn humanity's technological progress had stagnated, for the most part. It's strange, but I don't think Yaoyorozu-san has many friends. Uraraka mentioned with a small frown, and then waved her hands frantically. Of course, I could be totally off base with that assessment. Well, Midoriya smiled, we should try to fix that when we see her. Shouldn't we? Yeah. Uraraka pumped a fist in excitement. The verdette and brunette walked around a corner and saw an elderly couple having some difficulty walking across a crosswalk. Midoriya quickly stepped in to guide them and, after a moment's hesitation, Uraraka lent her aid as well. When both were guided to the other side, they thanked the pair before going their way. That was nice of you, Midoriya-san. Uraraka waved at the couple, inwardly gushing at how adorable they were together. He smiled while watching the elderly pair leave. Well, being a hero is more than just catching flashy villains. Just lending a helping hand can be enough. Uraraka looked at Midoriya momentarily before adopting a bright smile. You're right. Hey! Stop that guy, a woman shouted in the distance. He stole my purse. Glancing behind him, Midoriya spotted a purse snatcher racing toward him from around the corner. Oh no! Uraraka grabbed her friend's arm, trying to pull him away. Hey Midoriya, we should get out of the way. I don't see any heroes around. Midoriya wasn't listening, his gaze focused on the purse snatcher. A man with pitbull facial features, gray fur, and a black spiked collar around his neck. The pitbull man was heading towards them, and he could tell the man had tunnel vision. He was panicking, not paying much attention to his surroundings as he pushed past several bystanders and not looking both ways, running across the street as he attempted to flee the scene. Hey! Aren't you listening? Uraraka tried to pull him, but he wouldn't budge. He's coming this way. She was tempted to touch him with all 5 fingers and float him out of the way. I know. It'll be okay, he said calmly. Huh. Pulling away from her, he turned to act inconspicuous, and as the thief passed by him, he stuck out his leg to trip him, causing him to drop the purse while tumbling to the sidewalk. What the? Pitbull man turned to look up at Midoriya, smirking down at him. Why you? Midoriya, watch out! Uraraka cried. The thief pushed himself up and swung a wild punch at the verdette, but the blow never landed as the man was suddenly ensnared in a web of branches. Lacquered chain prison. Camui Woods suddenly swung onto the scene from high up, landing by the thief. Purse snatching and attempted assault. You are the incarnation of Eva? It's you. His eyes widened when noticing Midoriya standing by. Good to see you again too, Camui. Midoriya waved casually. Thanks for that save. Sweet. Got to see his special move up close. He inwardly cheered. Gotta write this down when I get back. Hold on, that's Camui Woods. Uraraka lightly gasped. I've only seen him on the internet. Camui swiftly pulled out a pair of cuffs from his belt and restrained the criminal, still keeping a few branches wrapped around him. Midoriya then reached down to pick the purse off the ground, handing it to the pro hero with a sly grin. I hope I wasn't interfering with your business? Camui Woods momentarily stared at the verdette before shaking his head. Oh, thank you for the assistance. Midoriya shrugged and smiled. Anytime. Camui then gave him a serious glare. This doesn't change anything. Remember what I told you? I know. Midoriya replied easily. I remember clearly. Camui nodded and glanced over to Uraraka, standing close to Midoriya. A friend of yours? Why, I am. She nodded, still surprised. Keep an eye on him. Camui warned the brunette. He's a good kid, but he can be quite reckless. With that, Camui returned the stolen purse and swung away with the criminal in tow, taking him to the nearest police station for processing. That was a little uncalled for. Midoriya frowned, watching the hero swing away. I haven't gotten into any trouble since that day. Uraraka blinked in confusion. Am I missing something? Oh yeah. Midoriya rubbed his neck sheepishly. Funny story actually. As the pair continued down the sidewalk, Midoriya retold the sludge villain incident while leaving out his encounter with All Might. After he finished, Uraraka punched him in the arm. What was that for? No wonder Camui warned me to keep an eye on you. She puffed her cheeks out in frustration. Why would you endanger yourself like that? You could have been arrested, or worse, killed by that villain. Well, he looked away with his hand on the nape of his neck. My body moved on its own. I couldn't just stand there and watch that guy die. Uraraka paused and stared at Midoriya. He risked his life to save someone he didn't know from a dangerous villain and didn't hesitate to save her and Yaoyorozu from those perverted creeps yesterday. He wasn't arrogant or bragging about it either. He seemed to be humble and down to earth. This guy just continued to surprise her. Are you okay, Uraraka? He asked, noticing she went silent and was staring at him hard. Did he have something on his face? Why? Uraraka lightly stammered, her blush marks turning a shade darker. I'm fine. It's just, you're really cool, Midoriya. Oh, thank you. He blushed lightly. Where'd that come from? Hey, why don't we head to the arcade before we head back? Uraraka eagerly suggested. Get a little more fun in before doing more schoolwork? Midoriya nodded. Yeah, I'm down with that. I haven't had a chance to go though, so I likely won't know any of the games. That and pretty much every video game from my era is gone or in a museum somewhere. Midoriya internally commented. That's okay. I'll show you how to play them. Uraraka grabbed his hand and pulled, making sure to keep her pinky lifted. I think it was a couple blocks this way, right? Why yeah, Midoriya replied, allowing himself to be guided by the cute brunette. Midoriya looked at Uraraka pulling him down the sidewalk. Her excitement was infectious as a warm smile appeared on his face. Well, part of my mission is to make friends close to my age. So, this is a good start, right? Fresno, California, June 2042. Let's see, casual clothes? Footwear? Toiletries? Personal documents? Izuku went down a list while shuffling through his duffel bag. Medicine bag? The day had finally come. He was leaving to start U.S. Army boot camp. He was both excited and extremely nervous. So much that his heart rate and breathing had slightly increased, and a bit of sweat accumulated on his temple. The encounter with Dr. Hatsum at the Innovation Expo 7 weeks prior was still fresh on his mind. He really couldn't believe this was happening. He was finally getting a chance at the armed forces. It was an opportunity he was determined not to squander. Izuku went through his bag a second time and after confirming he had all the necessary items on the list he had been given, he finally zipped it up. Pulling the bag's strap over his shoulder, he stepped out of his small bedroom and into the living room. He then stepped up to a small table with an urn and a picture of his mother, Inko. The day's finally here. I'm leaving for boot camp today. It's not a normal boot camp though. The program Dr. Hatsum signed me up for seems pretty top secret given how little info they've given me. Hopefully I'll get some answers today. He paused to collect his thoughts, twiddling his thumbs. I know you and Pegchan aren't exactly thrilled with this decision, but... He clenched his fists in determination. But I promise I'll give it my all and then some. I won't let you down. Upon saying his piece, he bowed to the picture and urn. I love you. I'll see you when I get back. With that, Izuku stepped out of the apartment and locked it. Going down the stairs, he stepped outside out of his apartment complex and into the parking lot. It was early in the morning around 4:30 a.m., 4:30, and the sun had yet to peek over the horizon. Street lamps provided enough lighting outside the building though. Hey, kid, a familiar voice shouted. Izuku looked ahead to see Dr. Hatsum standing by a red sedan, waving her hands to get his attention. He smiled and walked over to her. Hey doctor, it's good to see you again. He greeted, holding out his hand to which she eagerly shook. Despite the bags around her eyes, she seemed very energetic. Likewise, Fresno. Hope you've been well. Nice shirt by the way. His current attire consisted of all-black t-shirt with a gray Superman logo, olive cargo pants, and his red shoes. Thank you. He replied shyly. Bet you're glad to be done with boring high school? She asked. Why, yeah, you could say that. Izuku chuckled lightly. Well, put your bag in the trunk and hop on in. Dr. Hatsum pulled her door open. Your bus to the fort leaves at 6, and we got quite a drive to the pickup spot. Izuku nodded and, after placing his duffel bag in the trunk, he sat in the passenger seat. Thanks again for the lift, Doctor. He closed the door and buckled up. I don't have a ride, and the buses aren't running this early in Fresno, so dash. Think nothing of it. I'm happy to do it. The redhead smiled widely. After all, it's a freaking miracle I met you after Yamamoto's rejection. By the way, you can just call me Teruko if ya want. No need for formalities. She cheerfully stated. Are you sure? Izuku blinked, dumbfounded by how casual she was acting. Of course. Of course. She started the car and pulled out of the parking lot and onto the main road. By the way, you're friends with Corporal Yamamoto, right? Yeah. Peg-chan and I are childhood friends, actually. Izuku replied. Peg-chan? That's cute. Teruko gushed. That's like, what, the foundation of many love stories, right? Izuku stammered, feeling his face get hotter. It isn't like that. We're just friends. Teruko slyly smirked. That's how it begins. I think you're reading too much into it, Doctor. He stuttered. Teruko. She corrected him. Also, you told her you were accepted, yeah? How'd she take it? Upon eavesdropping on Izuku and Peggy's conversation at the convention center, it sounded like the latter didn't want her friend anywhere near the military. She could only imagine her reaction. Well, Izuku looked away, scratching his cheek sheepishly. Izuku was standing outside his apartment complex with Peggy sitting on her motorcycle, with her duffel bag securely strapped to the back. Her helmet resting in her lap. It was nice seeing you again, Peg-chan, Izuku said. Even if it was just for a week. Peggy nodded. Same here, Izuku-an. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. But duty calls, ya know? Izuku nodded. Yeah, I get it. He smiled hopefully. Maybe after I get through boot camp, we can meet up again? That's if we can both get time off at the same time. Peggy frowned and looked away. Izuku's smile dropped as he asked, Is something wrong? I'm being reassigned, Izuku-an. I can't give any details since it's classified, but I have no idea when I'll be free again. She answered. Izuku was disappointed to hear that but nodded in understanding. I get it. Duty comes first. Peggy was silent for a moment. She was still in disbelief that Izuku had been accepted into the army. He never should have passed the physical exam. It made her wonder if the recruiter at that station in San Fran was desperate to fill a quota and just passed him. She was very tempted to report him to the higher-ups, but she couldn't bring herself to do it. She looked back to her friend. Hey, Izuku-an, boot camp is going to be hell for you. You know that, right? She said bluntly. He knew better than anyone his physical ailments would affect him the most out of all the recruits, but he didn't care. He was driven. Izuku simply nodded. I know. So, you know there's no shame if you fail, right? If you do, can you move on and accept that you gave it your best shot? She asked hopefully. Izuku knew Peg-chan wasn't a fan of him joining the armed forces, but it sounded like she was inwardly hoping he'd fail. Peg-chan, if my best isn't enough, then yeah, I'll accept that. But, he adopted a determined expression, I'm gonna push myself beyond my limit before that happens. I'm not gonna squander this one chance I have. Peggy stared hard at Izuku for a moment and then sighed deeply. Surprisingly, her lips shifted upward into a warm smile. You can be really cool sometimes. You know that, Izuku-an? Thank you, he lightly stammered. He hadn't expected that response. Well, I still don't think you should be in the military, but you do deserve a chance. She held out her hand. Good luck to you. Izuku blinked and smiled before accepting the handshake. Thank you, Peg-chan. After retelling the event, Izuku ended by saying, she surprisingly took it better than I expected. She still doesn't approve of me being in the military, but she wished me luck nonetheless. I see. Teruko replied, taking in all she heard. Yamamoto is a classic tsundere without knowing it. She inwardly giggled. Shockingly though, my former friend didn't take the news too well. Izuku continued. Former friend? Teruko side-eyed the teen in confusion, still keeping her attention on the road. Yeah. We used to be friends when we were younger, but… Izuku sighed happily as he closed his locker for the final time, spending the last several minutes emptying its contents into his yellow backpack. Most of her peers had already finished and had cleared out of the hallway. Finally. Last day is over. He started walking away but didn't make it a few steps before his ex-friend and bully stepped in front of him. Zack looked at him with a condescending smirk. Midori, got a minute? Izuku frowned. Powers, please don't start anything. Remember, Peg-chan has that video of you dash. I'm not here to cause trouble. On the contrary, I'm here to make an offer to you. He declared. Offer? Izuku blinked, confused. Zack grinned while pulling out a piece of folded paper from his Letterman jacket pocket and handed it to the Asian American. Izuku cautiously took it and unfolded it, quickly reading its contents. His eyes then shot open in shock. Why you're going to the Dodgers? That's right. Zack smirked, rubbing his knuckles on his chest proudly. As soon as I win the state championship next week, I'm heading straight for LA. He made that statement with no sign of hesitation. He was fully confident in his personal abilities. Zack, it takes a team to win. Izuku thought dryly. Zack, that's great. But what about USC? Your scholarship? Turn them down. Who needs it? Zack waved off dismissively. Why bother with college when I can go straight to the big leagues and cash in? I guess, but dash. Izuku was cut off when Zack put an arm around his shoulders in a friendly manner. But I'll cut to the chase. Since I'm going pro, I'll be making a lot of money in no time. He smirked down at the smaller teen. I could use a manager. Someone to manage finances, my daily schedule, track my stats, keep the house clean and all. A partner in my success, if you will. First person I thought of was you. What do you say? Izuku was dumbfounded. Where the heck did this come from? I get it. You're shocked. I gave you crap the last few years. Well, Zack smiled, but Izuku could tell it wasn't genuine. I say we put that all behind us and let bygones be bygones. If you accept, I'll make it worth your while. I'll give you, say, 3% of my earnings? I could bump it up to 5 if you play your cards correctly. Think about it. When I get the richest contract in MLB history, that'll be a good chunk of change for you. Izuku wasn't sure what to think at the moment. Zack had physically and verbally abused him since junior high, and never seemed to show any remorse for it. Heck, even now he still wasn't apologizing. Why would he extend such a generous offer to him? He didn't have to ponder that thought long before deducing an answer. I only have one condition. Zack continued. Tell your girlfriend to delete that video she took. If she does, I'll make you rich. Sounds like a fair deal, no? That's the reason. Izuku inwardly sighed in disappointment, not even reacting to the fact Zack had referred to Peggy as his girlfriend. He's not sorry for anything. The onyx-haired teen pulled away from Zack. That's a nice offer, Zack. But even if I wanted to accept, which I don't, I can't. He turned to the brunette indifferently. I was accepted into the army. I have to report to boot camp next month. Zack's smirk immediately vanished as his jaw nearly hit the ground. Shock was plastered on his expression. What the? That's impossible. You? It's the truth. Izuku defended. I got my acceptance letter in the mail just a few days ago. That must be a mistake. Zack shouted. You can't even run 50 yards without running out of breath. How in the hell could you have been accepted? Did you cheat on their test or something? Ignoring his accusation, Izuku furrowed his brows. All I can say, Zack, is I was accepted. I have to report in June. Sorry, but you'll have to find someone else to be your partner. He spat out the last word sardonically. What the hell's with you? Zack demanded, taking a step toward the smaller boy. I'm offering you a chance to share in my rewards, but you'd rather try out for the army? What's the point? You're gonna flunk out anyway. Izuku hardened his gaze. You don't know that? Retard. Anyone with a brain cell knows you'll flunk out. He snapped. Look at you. Izuku narrowed his eyes and quietly retorted, I didn't know your meta ability also allowed you to see the future. Zack grabbed Izuku by the shirt and directed a piercing glare at him, making the short teen fearfully flinch. "What did you say?" "Why, you heard me," Izuku squeaked. In his panic, he dropped his backpack to the floor. "How long have you known?" Zack growled through clenched teeth. "Since junior high," Izuku replied, with nervous sweat racing down his face. "It didn't take me long to figure out." "Who all have you told?" Zack hissed, keeping his voice low in case anyone was nearby. "No one," Izuku truthfully answered. Peggy figured out the truth on her own at the same time as Izuku. How? Zack was visibly trembling in anger. It took every speck of self-control to keep himself from beating the crap out of Izuku. "Zack, you can throw 115 miles per hour fastballs for a whole game without breaking a sweat. That's physically impossible. You could definitely throw faster, but you choose to hold back to protect your secret," he explained evenly. "You knew this whole time and never ratted me out?" Zack cocked a brow, confused. Izuku shook his head. "No, I couldn't do that. Even to you." Zack glared at Izuku for a moment before releasing his hold on him. "And I don't plan on telling anyone." Izuku continued. "I wish you all the best with your future, Zack, but this is where we part ways." He extended his hand for a shake. The tall brunette didn't even acknowledge the hand as he stared hard at Izuku, scrutinizing him keenly. "Why?" Izuku cocked a brow. "Why what? You weren't even born in this country. Why are you so determined to join the military? What, you think people treat you better if they know you're in the military?" Zack questioned indignantly. "Well, you're wrong. You're still Asian and people won't care if you're a soldier or not." Izuku sighed and shook his head. "That has nothing to do with it, and not everyone discriminates like you. I want to serve because I want to help others. Simple as that." Zack cocked a brow. "That's why you're giving up the chance to make millions of dollars?" He clenched his teeth angrily. "You're just a scrawny, little weakling who'll be lucky to live past 30. You'll die in boot camp. Even if by some miracle you don't, why are you gonna throw your life away for people you don't even know?" Though Izuku was nervous, his eyes remained strong as he met Zack's gaze with unwavering conviction. No words needed to be exchanged. After a moment, Zack scoffed and began stomping off, stuffing his hands in his jacket pockets. "Whatever then. Enjoy what little life you have left then, nerd." Izuku sighed in relief, grateful Zack hadn't beaten him up. Guess the blackmail Peggy had on him was enough to get him to consider his actions. He turned to watch Zack stomp down the hallway. "Life isn't all about money. I hope one day you'll realize that, Zack." He picked up his backpack and resumed heading toward the school exit. However, thanks to his encounter with Zack, he missed his bus ride home. "Guess I'm walking home," he bemoaned. "Really wish I had a motorcycle." Teruko was momentarily speechless after Izuku finished recounting his last encounter with his bully. Unbeknownst to her, he intentionally left out the parts regarding Zack's meta ability. "Wait, he wanted you to be his manager after years of treating you like trash?" She blinked twice. "That makes no sense." "Yeah." Izuku rubbed his neck awkwardly. "I was confused for a while too. But after thinking about it, the only reason he'd do that is because that was his own way of apologizing without actually saying it. Zack's pretty petty and prideful like that. I dunno though, I may be thinking too much into it," he confessed. "Well, I wouldn't worry about it. He's wrong anyway," Teruko stated resolutely with a firm expression. "What you're doing isn't a waste. Trust me on that, Midoriya." Dr. Hatsum's words made Izuku inwardly happy but turned to her with a questioning gaze. "About that, you never told me what exactly this project is." "MP? Sar? I've never heard of either. Also, why is this boot camp not at Fort Benning?" Fort Benning near Columbus, Georgia was the U.S. Army facility where the vast majority of new Army recruits served their time in boot camp. To Izuku, it was unusual he wasn't being shipped there. In reverse order, Teruko responded, "Because this project is top secret, which requires a secret location not disclosed to the public. SSR, the Strategic Scientific Reserve, is a new division of the U.S. Army. As for MP, well," she smiled roguishly, "you'll see very soon what that's all about." Izuku was a bit unnerved by her smile but nodded. A new top-secret military division? Huh? What exactly did I get myself into? Mizudafu, Japan, November 2196. Midoriya wiped some sweat from his brow, tightened his grip on his shield's leather straps, and charged in for another attack. First, a feint to the left, then an uppercut from the bottom. The hulking blonde was still nimble enough to dodge and sidestep his blows, but only barely. When he tried to aim a right haymaker at Midoriya's face, it was too easy for the vedette to grab hold of his opponent's arm with both arms and vault him over his head. He was hoping to toss him out of the drawn ring in the dirt, securing a victory. However, the number 1 pro shifted his body midair to land on his feet, facing away with Midoriya still latched onto his right arm. Oklahoma smash. He shouted and began spinning in place. A miniature twister was created around him as Midoriya was pulled off his feet and spun around at rapid speeds. Being forced to release his hold, Midoriya was sent flying out of the ring and toward the debris littering the area. Huhiya! Midoriya flipped his body around and managed to bring his shield underneath him just in time as he crashed onto the roof of an old car. The roof caved in and crumbled from both the indestructible shield and its user's weight. A pained groan escaped Midoriya's throat as he pushed himself off the car. Lost again? Seriously, Toshinori? Twister? That's you holding back? He looked ahead at the hulking blonde standing 10 meters, 32 feet, away that had sent him flying. All Might cackled boisterously. Apologies, Captain. It seems even with these suppressor cuffs, it's still difficult for me to hold back my strength. Sure enough, locked onto Yagi's wrists and ankles were bulky, silver cuffs that were designed to suppress his amazing strength. After Midoriya's last college class had ended for the day, Yagi had arrived at the campus to pick him up in his truck. Since Takoba Beach was clean and an attraction for locals, the pair could no longer use it for training together without risking their respective secrets. Instead, Yagi brought them to the outskirts of Mizudafu to an old scrapyard. After negotiating with the owner to allow them to use the yard for training from prying eyes, the pair engaged in several rounds of sparring. Even with All Might giving himself a handicap with the suppressor cuffs, Midoriya had still lost every match so far. The number 1 hero's strength and speed was no joke. Midoriya grunted as he slid off the car and back to the ground. He was wearing his red combat boots, black military pants, and a long-sleeve camo shirt with several new tears in the fabric. Looked like he would need another new shirt. Meanwhile, All Might wore his usual pair of olive green cargo pants, white t-shirt, and boots. As he walked back to their makeshift ring, the vedette took a deep breath as the pain from colliding with the car faded away. Honestly, I can only imagine how hard it is for you to fight opponents that are weaker than you without accidentally killing them, or worse, getting civilians caught up in those whirlwinds your attacks create? Midoriya commented. Still smiling, All Might adopted a serious look in his eyes. Yes. It is certainly a challenge, but with decades of practice, I've learned when to pull my punches, so to speak. Living in a world made of cardboard, Midoriya remarked. His gaze then shifted to Yagi's left side. Yet someone still managed to give him such a gruesome injury. You know, perhaps you may have better success if you remove those weights? All Might mentioned. Midoriya was still wearing the 200 kilograms, 441 pounds, bands on his wrists and ankles from the beach training. He hadn't removed them except when he took showers. The vedette shook his head. No can do, All Might. These stay on till I take the practical portion of the entrance exam. All Might nodded in understanding. I understand. Do you need a break then, Captain? He inquired. We've been at it for an hour now. If you need a short rest to regain your bearings, I understand. Midoriya laughed wryly. Are you kidding? I can do this all day. He stepped back into the makeshift ring and got into a fighting stance with his unpainted shield held out in front. Are you sure you're not the one who needs a break? All Might laughed. I love your spirit. Tell you what, how about we change things up for this round? Let's forget about the ring for now and use the environment to our advantage. Midoriya glanced around at the various junky items surrounding him, being reminded of the state Takoba Beach was in before he had cleaned it. He imagined some of the junk had been transferred here, actually. Even with those cuffs on, He can still send me flying just from the air pressure of his attacks alone. I would stand a much better chance using the scrapyard as opposed to trying to fight him in the open ring. Midoriya quickly deduced. I can agree to that. He nodded. Excellent. If you're ready, then let's get started. With that, All Might rushed forward, bringing up his hands in a X-shaped position. Carolina smash. Right off the bat? Midoriya inwardly shouted. 2 arching whirlwinds were produced that stirred up the dust in the air and were strong enough to send Midoriya flying off his feet once more. He flipped acrobatically in midair and nimbly landed on his feet next to some debris. All Might didn't stop as he casually grabbed a broken AC unit one-handed and tossed it at his opponent. Midoriya swiftly jumped to the side as the unit smashed into the scrap behind him. All Might continued picking up debris around him and threw them at Midoriya, who dodged and deflected them with his shield. All Might knew he didn't need to throw anything at him, but he figured it wouldn't hurt to emulate something a strong or telekinetic villain would do. He's making me focus solely on defense before he rushes at me again. Midoriya realized. I won't give him that chance. After sidestepping a microwave that came within an inch of hitting his head, he twisted his body and tossed the shield away without looking. The shield ricocheted off several items around the area and All Might's eyes followed it, preparing to dodge or knock it away when it came close. However, this small momentary distraction was enough for Midoriya to quickly close the distance and send a roundhouse kick into All Might's jaw. Right as All Might recovered and was about to counter, the shield came flying and slammed into his mid-back area. He winced from the hard impact and nearly stumbled before quickly regaining his bearings. In that time, the shield bounced off a nearby car and back into Midoriya's hands. Pushing the offensive, Midoriya rushed forward to hit his opponent with the shield's edge. All Might, however, dodged the swing and pulled back his right arm for a powerful punch. Midoriya reacted immediately by holding up the shield and crouching low with his right leg back to anchor himself. Daiining. A small shockwave with the sound of a large bell resonated across the scrapyard. The ground underneath Midoriya cracked around him. The super soldier though maintained his ground as he held up the quaking shield. Toshinori's power really is no joke. Midoriya was reminded once more of the massive power gap between him and the number 1 pro. Yagi, meanwhile, tried not to visibly grimace from the pain flaring up his right hand and the ringing in his ears. He didn't look but guessed there was bloody bruising on his knuckles. The shield really is no joke, isn't it? He thought. I don't believe I could break it even if I wanted to. Shaking off his surprise, All Might continued to push forward. The blonde giant and the verdette super soldier were locked in with both parrying and dodging the other's blows. The shield rang as Midoriya blocked his opponent's hits and swiped it at them. Despite his best efforts, Midoriya was forced into a corner between large scrap items. Backed into a corner, Captain? All Might kept up his broad smile. What shall you do now? Midoriya smirked, an idea occurring to him. How about I throw my mighty shield? He quipped. He threw the disc to the right as it bounced off a couple items before heading straight for All Might's left side. The smiling blonde swiped his arm to the side, creating a small whirlwind that was enough to knock the shield off course. It hit the ground and rolled far out of Midoriya's reach. That was predictable. You have to be more creative than that. All Might stated matter-of-factly before rushing forward with his right fist raised back. But he bought it? Midoriya feigned surprise from his failed attack as the distance between him and All Might closed. Quickly calculating the speed of All Might's incoming punch, Midoriya reacted by ducking and sidestepping in time for the punch to swing past him and into a large industrial freezer. With his arm temporarily lodged inside it, Midoriya immediately turned to deliver his strongest kick into All Might's exposed left side. Brag! All Might's eyes shot open from the intense pain, unable to stop the torrent of blood spraying out of his mouth. Still locked into the fight, Midoriya stood up to deliver a strong neck chop. The number 1 hero couldn't stop himself from falling to his right knee. Unable to hold his form, All Might transformed back to his scrawny state in a cloud of steam. He gasped heavily with blood leaking from the corners of his mouth, too stunned from the pain to counter. Midoriya's eyes shot open in panic, realizing what he had done. "Ichie, are you all right?" he shouted. It worse? He panted heavily. Just give me a moment. Kneeling by his side, Midoriya looked away and frowned. I'm sorry, Toshinori. I shouldn't have done that. I just got caught up in the spar and then dash. That's fine. No need to dash. Please. Don't talk. Midoriya cut him off, noting the blood coming out as he talked. You can't lose any more blood. It took a few moments for Yagi to regain control of his breathing and for the flaring pain to steadily subside. With Midoriya's help, he shakily returned to his feet and helped guide him to an old oven for him to sit on. Please, I'm really sorry. Midoriya apologized, regret written over his face. I didn't mean to hurt you like that. Ha! Yagi laughed without any blood spewing from his mouth thankfully. Seriously, I'm fine. No need to apologize. I had that coming. I got too cocky there. Still I dashed. I said we should treat this sparring seriously. Yagi interrupted. You saw an opening and took it. You treated it like a real match and took advantage of an opponent's weakness. So, I'm not mad. That's on me for getting too cocky and leaving myself open like that. If you say so. Midoriya wasn't convinced. It didn't feel right to attack Toshinori's weak spot like that in a sparring match. This wasn't a real fight or a war zone, he reminded himself. Still though, Yagi's sweat dropped. Maybe we'll tone it down a bit after today and focus on technique a little more going forward. That might be for the best. Midoriya said awkwardly. After fully recovering from the painful blow, Yagi decided to call it a day. It was getting late and offered Midoriya a ride home, which he gladly accepted. On the drive back, the verdette glanced at the haggard blonde driving across from him, specifically his left side. Hey, Toshinori. I know it may not be any of my business, but have you considered wearing a protective vest? Midoriya inquired. What? Yagi glanced at him while keeping his full attention on the road. Ya no, just some gear with thick padding or better yet maybe something shock absorbent? Midoriya elaborated. It wouldn't hurt to have something there to protect your side. Yagi sighed. I never really needed support items in my career. I had some gauntlets for a while when I was younger, but those didn't work out. Didn't need them or anything else. With all due respect, you're not in your prime anymore, All Might. You have a pretty glaring weak spot that could knock you out of a battle if a villain gets lucky and hits it, or worse, finds out and intentionally targets it. Midoriya mentioned pensively. He didn't reply immediately. You take that into consideration, young Midoriya? A thoughtful expression on his face. No shame in trying to cover up your vulnerable areas. Midoriya continued. I mean that's part of the reason why I use the shield. He pointed to the leather circular case by his legs. I'm not bulletproof, so it's a lifesaver having something I can use to defend myself from gunfire. Speaking of the shield, Yagi spoke up, I noticed in our matches that when it gets knocked out of your reach, you're always moving to reclaim it whenever you can. That is a weakness that can be exploited. Midoriya nodded in agreement. Yeah. That's why I train so hard in throwing it. Make sure it always returns to me or at least near my location. But, he looked away as he remembered the shield earlier being blown away by All Might's attacks. That's not always foolproof, I'll admit. Perhaps take that into consideration when designing a costume? Yagi suggested. Support companies employ brilliant engineers and designers. I'm sure they could figure out something to help. Yagi then blinked as something occurred to him. By the way, when you get into UA, what will your costume look like? You can't go back to being Captain America. At least, maybe not for a while, right? Midoriya turned away to look at the passing buildings illuminated by the dim street lamps, with an introspective look. I'm not entirely sure about all that. Guess I'm still figuring it out. Well, it wouldn't hurt to start giving it some thought. Get a head start on it, ya know? Yagi said. Midoriya then realized that Toshinori had used when instead of if pertaining to getting accepted into the famous hero college. He understood that the pro hero was likely just confident in his abilities, but he figured it wouldn't hurt to address something that had been bugging him lately. Toshinori, you're about to be a teacher at UA. Does that mean you'll be one of the judges in the practical portion of the entrance exam? The haggard man shook his head. I'll be monitoring the exam, yes, but no, I won't be a judge. He looked at him with a smile as if he had read the vedette's mind. Rest assured, I won't pull any favors or anything like that. I want you to earn your spot on your own as much as you do. Midoriya smiled, feeling relieved. Thanks. That is a load off my mind. Now, I just have to hope Shield doesn't try anything. Midoriya dryly thought. 5 days had passed, and it was Saturday afternoon. Midoriya and Uraraka walked together to meet up with Yaoyorozu outside the same library the girls had met. Midoriya's attire consisted of his pair of red boots, dark blue pants, and a red and white plaid shirt with his brown leather jacket, his yellow satchel bag slung over his shoulder. Uraraka wore white shoes, black jeans, a white shirt with a pink Saturn in the center, and a pink zip-up hoodie with the sleeves rolled to her forearms, her hair tied into a messy ponytail. Yaoyorozu's casual wear emphasized her wealth as she wore expensive branded black shoes, tight black leggings with baggy pink shorts and a black belt, and a white short-sleeved button-up shirt, her hair tied up in a spiky ponytail. The heiress had booked a private study room on the top floor that included a table with desk chairs and dry erase boards on all of the walls, with space for a window and the door. The trio discussed which topics they needed to personally focus to better prepare themselves for the exam. For Midoriya it was history and Japanese calligraphy, and for Uraraka it was English and math. Meanwhile, Yaoyorozu herself seemed very knowledgeable in every subject. The three lended help to each other when it was needed. It might have been Midoriya's imagination, but it seemed like Yaoyorozu was simply happy to socialize with them. He was reminded of Uraraka saying that the Ravenette possibly didn't have many friends. Perhaps that assessment had been spot on. After a couple hours of studying, the trio decided to take a snack break and relax for a bit. My brain hurts. Uraraka leaned back in her chair, rubbing her temples with 4 fingers. Midoriya had noticed the brunette didn't use all of her fingers to touch anything. He wondered if she was intentionally doing it, or if it was a subconscious thing. Why does English have to be so hard? Midoriya smirked at her. People who speak English would say the same thing about Japanese, ya know. Not all of us grow up in America, Midoriya, Uraraka retorted. To be fair, English is considered the hardest foreign language to learn. Yaoyorozu chimed in. So it can be difficult learning for the first time? You seem to speak English quite fluently, Yaoyorozu-san. From what I've heard so far, at least. That doesn't count. Uraraka sternly countered. Yaoyorozu-san's a genius? Yeah, that's true, he conceded. Oh, you both are too kind. Yaoyorozu looked away shyly. I wouldn't say I'm a genius. I would. Midoriya stated plainly. I already know you're very smart, and I've only known you a week now. Thank you, Midoriya-san. She blushed lightly. Uraraka felt a slight twinge inside her chest at that interaction. She wasn't sure what it was but shook her head to forget about it. Yeah. Is there any subject you're not good at, Yaoyorozu? Growing up, I had the privilege to receive tutoring from very intelligent people on multiple subjects. Yaoyorozu said modestly. So, I can't take all the credit for everything I know. She's really humble about it. Midoriya inwardly complimented. I'm really impressed though with how well you've learned Japanese. Midoriya-san, the Ravenette pointed out. Especially in a relatively short amount of time. You moved to Japan in January, correct? That's right. And what can I say? He shrugged. I'm a fast learner. Having an enhanced brain and eidetic memory helps too. He mentally remarked. I've noticed though when you're studying history, you seem to be focusing mostly on events in the last century or so. At least, so far this afternoon. Yaoyorozu pointed out. Is that on purpose? Wow, she's very observant. Midoriya was impressed. I like to focus on different time periods in my history studies. Just to make sure I'm getting good exposure across the past. He half-lied. Today I'm focusing on the time after the Third War. I see. That does make sense. Yaoyorozu paused to reach into her designer bag to pull out a book. Have you read this? I'd recommend the first few chapters. They summarize that period fairly well without lacking too many crucial details. Oh, thank you. Midoriya gladly accepted the book. You're welcome. She smiled. As the trio continued their studies, Midoriya read through the first several chapters of the history book. It was primarily covering the aftermath of World War III and then advent of quirks, as it's called, particularly the quirk-related laws passed and the superhero groups that were formed worldwide to combat the rise of crime and chaos. It was also during this point of history, the Dark Times, as it's called, that S.H.I.E.L.D. had been formed. Initially meant to be a governing force for America's first heroes before eventually evolving into the worldwide espionage organization it was today. At the moment, Midia was focusing on the laws passed to manage the metahuman crisis. So most of these quirk restriction laws in the world were put in place during the dark times following the Third War. Their purpose was to initially re-establish order. Midia inwardly noted while reading the book. I can understand their reasoning given the time, but once a semblance of order was re-established by the heroes, they should have gone back and reworked some of these laws to be more reasonable. A lot of these laws nowadays don't make a lick of sense. I mean, people can't use their abilities whatsoever in public unless they get a license or in self-defense. There has to be a better way to handle this. You okay, Midoriya-san? Huh. He snapped out of his musings to turn to Yaoyorozu, who was looking at him curiously. You had a very intense look on your face. Was something in the book confusing you? She inquired. Oh, no. He trailed off. Come on, just play it off, soldier. It's just pretty sad to read how bad things were in the dark times. How scary and violent it all was. He responded. For both quirk users and quirkless. Yaoyorozu frowned slightly and nodded. Yes. It makes you appreciate what our ancestors had to endure in those times, and the hard work and sacrifices past pro-heroes had to do to get us to this point of relative peace we're in now. It really does. Uraraka spoke up. Believe it or not, my great-grandparents on my dad's side were in the meta-concentration camps. My dad showed me an old journal that has been passed down in our family. She frowned despondently. It's just really horrible to read what they went through, just for being different. Midoriya lowered his head, frowning at the memory of those inhumane facilities set up across various nations, not just in Japan. Did their journals say if they made it out alive? Yaoyorozu asked, concerned. Many early quirk users in Japan were killed in those awful camps. Uraraka nodded, a wistful smile appearing on her face. Yes. Thankfully, they were both saved by Captain America and the Howling Commandos. Midoriya's eyes widened slightly. Really? Uraraka replied happily. Yeah. When I was little, sometimes before bed, my dad would read some of the entries to me. They simplified it for me and skipped over the graphic stuff, of course. But my great-great-grandparents were going to be gassed in the chambers. She paused momentarily to collect her thoughts, continuing, they thought they were going to surely die. Then, at the last second, Captain America and his team stormed the camp and liberated everyone. Midoriya remained silent and listened intently. There were several rescue ops in Japan, but I think I remember what mission this was. That's amazing that your family has such a big part of quirk history as an heirloom, Uraraka-san. Yaoyorozu said excitedly. You wouldn't happen to know which camp they were in, would you? Uraraka nodded. It was in the Osaka Prefecture camp. Osaka? Midoriya immediately recalled that night. He remembered it vividly. If I remember correctly, they were liberated on September 24, 2044. Midoriya instantly responded. At 2000 hours. It took approximately 30 minutes to take the camp and free the prisoners. Another hour to guide them all to safety and set up medical and food stations in secure locations before the JPDF reinforcements moved in. Both Uraraka and Yaoyorozu looked at Midoriya in surprise, who was staring at the tabletop in a trance. Uraraka blinked twice. Yeah, that's right. How did you? The verdette's eyes widened, realizing his error. Oh, but? He rubbed his neck awkwardly, trying to quickly think up an explanation. A big fan of Captain America. I studied his hero career extensively while I was living in America. I remember reading up on the Osaka meta-concentration camp liberation. That's all. Please buy it. He inwardly hoped. It's believable, right? I suppose that makes sense. Yaoyorozu nodded, looking at him dumbfounded. Although, I'm impressed you were able to state all of that based on the limited info Uraraka gave. Seriously? Uraraka grinned. You must be a huge Captain America otaku, huh? Midoriya laughed nervously. Why, something like that? Dodged a bullet there? He internally sighed in relief. Hey, it's okay. Uraraka patted his back supportively. It's nothing to be embarrassed about. Truthfully, Yaoyorozu-san and I are both Captain America otakus too. Right? Yaoyorozu nodded with a small blush. Why, admittedly I am. Wait, what? This really dumbfounded Midoriya. Although he was globally acknowledged as the first pro-hero, something he didn't agree with, he had noticed it was mostly Americans that still loved Captain America, not surprisingly. Sure, there were people across the world that liked him and appreciated what he accomplished, but most countries primarily supported their own national heroes, past and present. Nothing wrong with that, he thought. Needless to say, the super soldier was quite flummoxed over already meeting 3 people in Japan that were fans of his old hero identity with All Might, Uraraka, and now Yaoyorozu. He honestly wasn't expecting anyone in Japan to know Captain America outside the name alone when he initially moved to the country. Is something wrong, Midoriya-san? Yaoyorozu inquired. Huh? Midoriya snapped out of his musings, looking at the Ravenet. And oh why? Well, it looked like you were thinking hard about something. She mentioned. Oh, I was actually curious about something, he calmly said. Why do you like Captain America, Yaoyorozu-san? I mean, it makes sense for Uraraka, and I grew up in America so I had more exposure to him growing up than any of you would. Honestly, I didn't think anyone in Japan would know who he is outside the name. Uraraka turned to Yaoyorozu, equally curious. Well, she lowered her head, seemingly contemplating how to answer. My family has always been fans of the captain, I suppose. One of my ancestors apparently knew him and was good friends with him if their personal writings are any indication. And, aside from his cheesy hero name, she chuckled lightly before continuing, I think Captain America was what all heroes should strive to be, regardless of race or nationality. He was selfless, courageous, intelligent, and held strong conviction in doing the right thing. It's no coincidence the first generation of pro-heroes and vigilantes after his mysterious disappearance were inspired by him, dressing up in colorful uniforms with hero names to help make people feel safe. He didn't care about popularity polls or becoming #1. He wanted to save and protect people. He was a true hero. Midoriya and Uraraka were speechless. Realizing they were both staring at her, Yaoyorozu blushed heavily in embarrassment. I mean, that's just what I think. Sorry if it doesn't make sense. Uraraka shook her head, smiling brightly. No, that's a great reason, Yaoyorozu-san. That was pretty deep. Midoriya commented, but a thought then crossed his mind. She said one of her ancestors knew me? I don't recall anyone by the name Yaoyorozu. Must have had a different surname maybe? He pondered. Who could it be? Thank you. Yaoyorozu blushed cutely. I don't know if I could ever be like the captain, but I do want to rescue people like him and 13 do. Uraraka stated, adopting a determined smile. Rescuing is what I want to focus on in hero work. 13? Midoriya glanced at Uraraka's bag and noticed 2 chibi-like accessories hanging from it. One was 13 the space hero and the other was Captain America. How did he not notice that before? If he remembered correctly, 13 was a pro-hero that specialized in rescue operations and disaster relief. Her quirked black hole was a powerful ability that he'd admit he had a healthy fear of. He was thankful the space-themed heroine was not a villain, inwardly shuddering at the wide-scale damage she could cause. Rescuing is the main job of a hero. It was then that a thought occurred to Midoriya. By the way, what are your quirks? That is if you're comfortable sharing. He quickly said, remembering that some people were sensitive about their meta abilities. Thankfully, neither Uraraka or Yaoyorozu looked offended or uncomfortable with the question. Oh, I just realized I never told you. Uraraka smiled. Mine's called zero gravity. If I touch an object with all my fingers on my hand, I can make it weightless. Midoriya's eyes widened in astonishment. Oh wow, that's an amazing ability. Without realizing it, he pulled out a notebook from his bag and proceeded to jot down notes on a section for the Gravity Girl. All the applications it can be used for, wow. If you get the proper training, you can be an amazing hero, Uraraka. Uraraka blushed as scratched the back of her head bashfully. Ah, thanks. Yaoyorozu-san actually said the same thing, so that means a lot. Well, it's true. Midoriya grinned. Poor Isaac Newton would be rolling in his grave though if he heard about you. Uraraka couldn't help but chuckle at that comment. Midoriya flipped over a couple pages, looking at Yaoyorozu expectantly. And you, Yaoyorozu-san? My quirk is creation. She answered. I can convert the lipids of my body to create any inorganic material, so long as I know the molecular makeup of said item and I have enough lipids to make it. Midoriya's eyes widened further, jotting down notes at lightning speeds for her dedicated section. That's incredible. So many applications, such a versatile ability. With the right training, you could become an expert in rescue operations and combat. You could make medical supplies, tools, battle armor, and any weapon you wanted. Amazing. The variety of meta abilities these days never ceases to surprise me. Midoriya thought excitedly. They both have awesome abilities. Yaoyorozu and Uraraka both looked at the verdette, wide-eyed. The way he was mumbling under his breath and writing notes so fast was both impressive and kind of creepy. Midoriya? Uraraka weakly smiled. Hearing his name, the super soldier broke from his trance and looked up from his book to see the girls looking at him, dumbfounded. He blinked and felt his face flushed in embarrassment. Was muttering, was I? They both nodded. Sorry about that. He sheepishly replied, I'm really fascinated by quirks, especially heroes and sometimes villains. I can't help but make entries whenever I hear or come across one that's very interesting. I see. So, it's like a hobby for you? Yaoyorozu asked. Something like that, he nodded. Does that mean you just made entries for both me and Yaoyorozu-san? Uraraka inquired. Is that okay? He asked hesitantly. I don't mind. Do you think you could show me? Well, Midoriya looked away uneasily. It's not done yet. I'd like to get some more info down as well as some ideas for practical application before showing it. Yaoyorozu nodded. I understand. Feel free to ask me any questions pertaining to my quirk whenever you want. She leaned forward. When you're done, I'd be interested to see what you wrote. Same here. Uraraka added excitedly. Maybe hearing from a different perspective on my quirk can give me ideas on how to use it better. Sure. I will. Midoriya nodded dumbly. Make sure they're very well thought out. Nodding in response, Uraraka then asked out of curiosity, do you have an entry on 13, perhaps? Oh, yeah, actually. He reached into his bag to pull out his Modern Hero Analysis book number 12 from his bag, handing it to the brunette. It's on the 13th page, and no, that was not on purpose. Uraraka took the notebook and flipped to the designated page. There was only curiosity in her gaze. He was half expecting her to laugh at him, but her warm auburn eyes roamed over the page. Oh wow. 13's my favorite pro and I never knew that. Yaoyorozu, look at this. She handed the book to the Ravenet. Taking the offered book, Yaoyorozu looked over the pages, taking note of the care and effort with ink and crinkled sections. This is impressive, Midoriya-san. You put so much care in organizing and detailing your notes. You must do well in school, yes? Well, he rubbed his neck bashfully, I do try my best. He must have a very analytical mind to note so many details regarding all these pro-heroes. Yaoyorozu inwardly noted. If he applies that mind to battle scenarios against criminals and villains, he'd make an excellent strategist in the hero field. If you're okay with it, I'd like to see more of your notes in the future, if it's all right? She shyly requested. Sure. Midoriya blinked, confused. Dr. Hatsum was the only one who ever cared to look at my notes. They're both really interested to see them. We should get back to studying. Yaoyorozu pointed out, handing the notebook back to the verdette. We only have this room for another 2 hours. Midoriya and Uraraka nodded. Is it okay if we start on math now? Uraraka questioned. I don't see why not. I can help you with that, Uraraka-san. Yaoyorozu offered, and then looked at Midoriya. Are you all right with that, Midoriya-san? Midoriya shrugged nonchalantly. Doesn't bother me. By the way, Yaoyorozu-san, Uraraka turned to the Ravenet. If you want, is it okay if we drop suffixes when we're around each other? I mean, we're all friends now, right? Are really? Yaoyorozu sputtered in surprise. Yeah. Is that okay? She tilted her head. Yaoyorozu looked between Midoriya and Uraraka for a moment in shock before smiling brightly, her eyes practically shining. Yes. I'd like that. Awesome. Uraraka cheered, pumping a fist. The black-haired heiress felt a warm feeling swell inside her. She had many acquaintances in her life, but never friends who actually wanted to get to know her aside from the fact that her family was wealthy. However, both Uraraka and Midoriya never once inquired about her financial status so far. They genuinely wanted to be friends with her. She couldn't be any happier. I haven't even been accepted into UA yet and I already have 2 friends? This is certainly a welcome surprise. Midoriya simply smiled, happy to have made another friend, especially over the fact they were all UA hopefuls and aspiring pro-heroes. His thoughts then drifted to their reasonings for admiring his hero identity. His actions resonated through time to inspire Uraraka and Yaoyorozu, and even made it possible for the former to be born. It was an eye-opening experience for the super soldier. He'd never thought he'd meet anyone in modern times that had been impacted directly by his past exploits. Really brings things into perspective. He inwardly marveled. All the people we rescued from those camps, makes sense some of their descendants would be around today. He smiled at the pair. Definitely makes all the sacrifice worth it. Uraraka noticed the smile, and asked, something on your mind, Midoriya? Oh. Realizing he was unintentionally staring, he waved his hands frantically. Nothing. Let's get started on those math problems. Shall we? He replied, pulling out blank sheets of paper. Yaoyorozu took note of Midoriya's peculiar behavior and simply shelved it away. Everyone had their own idiosyncrasies, perhaps this was just part of who Midoriya was? A matter to ponder on another time, she supposed. Muzutafu, Japan, February 2197. It was early in the morning and dawn had yet to arise. Midoriya was awake and currently in the process of packing his yellow bag with essential items and placing the shield in its case. After that, he pulled out a hearty breakfast from the fridge he had prepared the night before in order to save time. While it was warming up, he walked over to his work desk. He reached into the drawer and pulled out a notebook with the title Reports written on the front in English. Flipping it open, he turned to a blank page and grabbed a pen to start writing in English. From Captain America to Commander-in-Chief. Protocol, Activity Report. February 26th, the day of JP's UA University entrance exam has arrived. I have trained and studied the last 14 months for this day. The success or failure of my mission hinges on today. I am fully confident in my abilities to pass both written and practical portions. The efforts of those who helped get me to this point are greatly appreciated. However, successfully accomplishing this mission will not just depend on me, but how the panel of judges at UA perceive my abilities. It is possible they may gloss over me for candidates they deem more qualified, whatever those requirements may be. Nevertheless, I intend to make my country proud. My next report will outline the results of the exam and determine next steps. Finishing his report, he closed the book and placed it back in the drawer. 2 hours later, Midoriya walked out of his apartment and locked the door. He wore his red boots, faded blue jeans, and button-up green and yellow plaid shirt with his usual brown jacket over it. His shield case was strapped to his back with his yellow satchel hanging from his left shoulder. Placing his keys away, he looked down the corridor to see Uraraka stepping out of her apartment. The recently turned 18-year-old was wearing her high school uniform with a thick brown jacket over it, and her black school bag was strapped to her back. You ready, Uraraka-chan? Midoriya asked. Stepping away from her door and down the hall toward him, she smiled brightly. Ready, Midoriya? Midoriya couldn't help but smile at the nickname. Uraraka had decided to give it to him after Christmas, and even Yaoyorozu, or Yamamo as Uraraka now called her, was even calling him by it. He didn't mind, however. It felt good to have people who sincerely cared about him. Not gonna lie though, she fidgeted slightly, I'm a bit nervous. Midoriya chortled. Join the club. But it'll be okay. We've studied and trained hard for this, right? Uraraka pumped her right fist in determination. Let's both do our best. Midoriya nodded before they walked together down the stairs, ready to take the test that would determine their futures. No matter how long you train someone to be brave, you never know if they are or not until something real happens. Veronica Roth. Fort Erskin, see, June 2042. Izuku couldn't help but nervously twiddle his thumbs as he sat in his seat in the dimly lit room. He was unsure of what to make of his predicament as he sat with a dozen other people at a long table all on one side, waiting in silence. Dr. Hatsum had dropped him off at the designated bus stop. The ride to the base was an uneventful one, but it gave Izuku time to calm his nerves to a degree. The dozen or so occupants on the bus, the same that were in the room with him, were relatively silent and didn't speak a word to each other. It was a bit weird that no one was talking, but Izuku figured it was army procedure, so he remained silent as well. After a long drive, they finally arrived at the base. Located in Northern California and nestled in a hilly forest, the military facility designated as Fort Erskin was secluded well from civilization. The nearest town was half an hour drive away. The barbed wire fences, constant MP patrol, and the restricted area signs reinforced the impression that this place was not for civilians. In the couple hours since arriving, Izuku had gone through the standard procedure of onboarding new army recruits. He had filled out various forms of paperwork, taken a physical exam, and had been presented the military's code of conduct, policy, and guidelines that he was expected to follow. He was also required to turn over any inappropriate material, not that Izuku had any. Though the personnel he had interacted with had been professional, Izuku could see the shocked confusion in their eyes when they first laid eyes on him. He couldn't really blame them. He wasn't exactly an ideal army candidate physically. The only thing that deviated from the onboarding protocol was the dreaded army haircut, or the lack thereof. Just as he was about to get his head shaved, Dr. Hatsum swooped in at the last second to stop it. She ordered the barber to only take off enough to where Izuku could comfortably put on his uniform's cap and nothing more. The barber merely complied with an uncaring shrug. Izuku was both grateful and surprised, grateful that he wouldn't have to sport a crew cut, he knew he couldn't do it, and surprised that Dr. Hatsum had such authority on the base. When he asked the doctor about it, she nonchalantly waved it off while stating, "We do things a bit differently here. You'll see soon." She winked. It was confusing, but he supposed he shouldn't look a gift horse in the mouth. Meanwhile, Izuku's brown eyes darted left to right from his place at the long table, studying the room and the people sitting with him. There were a dozen or so, some late teens and a few young adults, all dressed in standard U.S. Army combat uniforms. He was in one as well, though his uniform was comically baggier on him. Apparently, his current uniform was the smallest size they had on base until they could acquire a custom one to fit his smaller size. He hoped it would come soon. He felt like more of a dork than usual in these baggy clothes. The astute teen took note of the badges on the group's uniforms, signifying their ranks as privates. Each of them sat straight with correct posture and neutral facial expressions. What's going on here? He anxiously wondered. This isn't a training camp for cadets, at least, not from what I've seen so far. Where am I? He wished that whoever was in charge would show up. The silence of the room and stiffness from everyone present was making him mildly uncomfortable. As if his wish had been answered, the room's door off to the side opened. Immediately, everyone at the table stood up at attention. Izuku momentarily stumbled out of his seat before doing his best to mimic the other's stance. Despite his best efforts, it was clear that he stuck out like a sore thumb. Man, this is so embarrassing. Izuku inwardly fretted. I look like such an idiot. Izuku didn't have long to lament on his improper stance as he laid eyes on who walked in. His eyes snapped open while his breath hitched. Is that, no way? Gracefully stepping into the room was a young woman with glossy black hair tied into a bun with a large strand hanging on the right side of her face. She wore a USMC Blue Service uniform, USMC Blue Service A, to be specific. It consisted of a midnight blue long-sleeve coat, a white collared shirt, a white belt around her waist, a midnight blue dress skirt, black tights and black pumps. To top it off, she wore a USMC white peaked cap. She stopped by the projected screen on the wall and turned to face the group. "Recruits, welcome to Fort Erskin. I'm Corporal Peggy Yamamoto of the Marine Corporation. I have been tasked with dash." She trailed off as her professional demeanor instantly vanished when she spotted Izuku at the table. A tense moment of silence passed as the two childhood friends stared at each other in shocked disbelief. Neither could believe what they were seeing. "PP Peg-chan?" Izuku felt himself tremble. What is she doing here? What the hell is Izuku-an doing here? Peggy inwardly screamed. Meanwhile, everyone else in the room looked on at the scene in confusion. What was going on? Should they speak up? Did those two know each other? At the end of the table was a young Caucasian man shorter than Izuku at 5 feet 3 inches, 161 centimeters, yet was gruff and burly with dark brown hair. His bushy eyebrows furrowed in annoyance. Unlike his fellow candidates, he had no quarrel in speaking up. Corporal? You were saying something?" he gruffly asked. Snapping out of her stupor, Peggy coughed and quickly recomposed herself. "Anyways, I have been tasked with overseeing your training for the next 10 weeks that you're here." This is what she was reassigned to? Izuku inwardly yelled. Though most of you are already in shape, Peggy's eyes briefly lingered on Izuku, which didn't escape his notice, as she continued, "I assure you that this intense training regimen will be necessary to ensure your bodies and minds are fully prepared for the coming procedure." Izuku blinked. "Procedure?" To elaborate further, I'll leave that to the director of this program. On cue, another figure walked through the door. Colonel Chester Phillips, U.S. Army. An older Caucasian gentleman wearing a U.S. Army Green Service uniform that consisted of a green Army peaked cap, dark green jacket over a tan shirt and black tie, green pants, and dark brown shoes. The colonel's insignia was stitched onto his jacket with other noteworthy badges of achievements as well. "Thank you, Corporal." "At ease, recruits?" With that said, everyone relaxed and returned to their seats. Colonel Phillips looked at the recruits with a serious, impassive expression. The great General Patton once stated that wars are fought with weapons, but they are won by men. Reaching into his pants pocket, he pulled out a clicker. A ceiling-mounted projector then displayed various video clips and photos on the wall in front of the table. All of them revolved around metahuman riots and protests in communities across America and the rest of the world. Metahumans and police/National Guard fighting each other. Violent protests and riots from various sides, one calling for equal rights for metahumans while the other demanded segregation. The extreme sides included metahuman supremacists calling for their fellow brethren and sisters to unite against regular folks, while the pureblood supremacists pushed for the extermination of metahumans altogether. Other clips displayed the carnage and damage caused by these incidents. One of the candidates sitting to the right of Izuku was a young Caucasian man, only 2 years older than Izuku, 5 feet 9 inches, 175 centimeters, tall with short brown hair and a relatively attractive face. When one of the clips displayed a massive fire breaking out in a Brooklyn neighborhood, his fists clenched tightly as his face scrunched up. Though Izuku was no stranger to the current climate, it was impossible to not grimace at the awful scenes. It pained him to see so many people, brothers and sisters, American citizens, people in general, all fighting one another, killing each other. All because some were born with abilities they never asked for. Did that make them any less human? It all stemmed from one thing: fear. That being said, Colonel Phillips continued, today we are faced with a different kind of war. Ever since the first metahuman was born in 2014, more and more exceptional individuals have been born. The metahuman phenomenon is one that the world is currently unprepared to handle. That is where we come in, ladies and gentlemen. With a click, another slide appeared displaying a black circle with an eagle spreading its wings. A shield with the letters SSR was positioned over the predatory bird's breast. Izuku, the military geek he was, had never seen that logo in any of his readings. The Strategic Scientific Reserve is an effort made up of the best minds in the free world. Our goal is to create the best army in history. Its purpose isn't to conquer, rather, to re-establish order and maintain peace. Colonel Phillips explained. It will give the US and her allies the time needed to overhaul their legal systems to account for metahumans before total anarchy consumes the world. I see. They want a force that can effectively combat metahumans, preventing them from overthrowing governments on a whim. Izuku nodded in understanding. However, every army starts with one man. And yes, when I say man, I am including women too. Don't lecture me. It took every fiber of Peggy's being to suppress an eye roll and groan. At the end of these 10 weeks, we will choose that person. They will be the first in a new breed of super soldier. This caught everyone's attention. Super soldier? Yes, you heard me. Super soldier. He seemed to have read their collective minds. Clicking the remote, the screen changed to display the acronym AMP. Under it was an animated outline of a human body. The Artificial Meta Project, or AMP as you've seen in your paperwork, was created and is led by Dr. Teruko Hatsum, the world's most renowned scientist in meta-ability research. Without getting technical, candidates will undergo a procedure by Dr. Hatsum that will push the human body far beyond its natural limits into the realm of superhuman. The animated human grew taller with bigger muscles, a turquoise glow shimmering off it. Even the more stoic recruits at the table couldn't help but react to this revelation with shocked expressions. An artificial meta-ability? It was possible? Izuku himself couldn't believe what he was hearing. His eyes widened as his facial expression contorted from shock. What? Wait, that's impossible, isn't it? Ever since he started studying meta-abilities, the thought of a normal person acquiring one never occurred to him as a realistic possibility. It was something you had to be born with. If you weren't born with an ability, you weren't getting one. End of discussion. This news, however, changed everything. Izuku wished he had his notebook on him. There were so many questions he wanted to ask, but he didn't dare interrupt the colonel and digress into one of his infamous mutterstorms, as Peg-chan called them. So, he remained silent and listened carefully. Now when I say superhuman, the colonel further elaborated, I don't mean you'll be flying, shooting lasers from your eyes, lifting buildings, or any nonsense like that. Though you will be capable of physical feats that no normal human being would ever be capable of, we're still in the real world here. He says it's nonsense, but there likely are meta-abilities that would make those feats possible for some. Izuku reasoned. Or at least there could be one day. This super soldier army will turn the tide in the growing conflict with meta-terrorists and human purists alike, and re-establish peace to the world. Colonel Phillips stated. The screen returned to the SSR emblem as the colonel walked from one side of the table to the other to look at the recruits closely. All 13 of you have been selected because you stand out amongst your peers. You exemplify qualities that make you the best candidates. Whatever challenges may come, we will win because we will have the best men. Colonel Phillips trailed off when he finally noticed Izuku's presence. The Asian American teen remained upright in his seat and tried to look composed and not meet the colonel's gaze. Phillips blinked twice to snap out of his stupor. And because they're going to get better. Much better. As he walked away, Izuku side-eyed the colonel. Subtle. He sweat-dropped. Colonel Phillips returned to the front of the room. Any questions? One hand went up, the brunette sitting by Izuku. Yes, Private Barnes? What exactly is the criteria for getting selected first? He asked. I can't say. That decision will not be up to me. Ultimately, Dr. Hatsum will be the one who decides, the colonel answered. It might have been Izuku's imagination, but he could have sworn the colonel looked annoyed upon giving that response. He was probably just imagining things though. Another hand went up. This time, it was from an attractive, athletic-looking 6 feet 0 inches feet, 183 centimeters, tall young woman with piercing blue eyes and long blonde hair tied into a bun. Yes, Private Carter? Is this procedure even safe? She asked evenly. You're talking about changing a person down to the molecular level. Has anyone survived? Are there any side effects? Is this permanent? This is just a lot to take in, sir. Everyone at the table nodded in agreement. She's not wrong. Izuku inwardly agreed. I'm skeptical as well. This all seems too unbelievable to be real. Then again, meta-abilities in general were considered fantasy not even 3 decades ago. So, he supposed he should have an open mind. Dr. Hatsum can give you a more thorough explanation for the procedure's specifics at a later time. But I can reassure you, this procedure is indeed safe. Colonel Phillips replied. This project wouldn't exist otherwise. Well, it's 95% safe. For what that's worth. Peggy sardonically thought, reminded of her conversation with the bubbly doctor in San Francisco. Peggy's eyes widened as the realization struck her like lightning. The same night that Izuku was unexplainably accepted into the army was the same one she turned down Dr. Hatsum's offer. It was highly possible she was in the same area when Izuku went to the recruitment station. Given the mere fact that Izuku was in the SSR, the puzzle pieces immediately came together. It all made sense now. Hatsum. As Peggy remained outwardly composed, a hot fire was raging within her at the eccentric military scientist. UB***. Though no one else in the room seemed to notice Peggy's inner turmoil, Izuku immediately sensed it. A few beads of sweat raced down his face as he involuntarily shuddered. She's pissed. What's up with her? If there are no more questions, all of you head to Training Ground Beta and await further instruction from your drill instructor. Dismissed. Colonel Phillips instructed. Yes, sir. The group responded. With that, the recruits walked in a single-file line out of the room. Izuku couldn't help but glance back to Peggy, seeing her steely gaze was locked onto him like a hawk. He quickly looked away, focusing on staying in line. I don't think she wants me here. He thought more about his situation. So this is what Dr. Hatsum recruited me for? A super soldier project? Why me? After the 13 recruits exited the room, Colonel Phillips walked up to Peggy. Corporal, will you please accompany me to Dr. Hatsum's office? I need to have a talk with her about her choice in candidates. I'm sure you know what I mean. Yes, sir. I was actually about to head to her office myself. She replied. The older Army veteran curtly nodded, and the pair walked out of the room and down the corridor in the direction of the science division. Do you know that skinny kid, Corporal? Phillips inquired. Yes, sir. She nodded. Izuku Midoriya. 17, from Fresno, California. Recent high school graduate. Quite intelligent. Physically he is on the frail side. She truthfully admitted. Phillips huffed. That's an understatement. Any clue why the good doctor would think it's a good idea to bring that kid here? Peggy didn't respond immediately, many thoughts raced through her head. No, Colonel. She then adopted a determined expression. But whatever thoughts Dr. Hatsum may have in regard to Cadet Midoriya, I'm going to make her see reason. Mizudafu, Japan, February 2197. The train ride to UA University was around 20 minutes by train. Midoriya and Uraraka used that time to quiz each other over a few topics to refresh their memory. The written exam was first, so the pair wanted to be clear-headed and ready to cover any topic that would appear. Shortly after disembarking from the train station, Midoriya and Uraraka were both standing before the school entrance. The main building consisted of 4 skyscraper-sized towers with blue windows connected by enclosed bridges in the center. A giant wall lined the campus's perimeter, with the only point of entry being the blue gate with the golden UA emblem on top. Though Midoriya had seen the facility from the outside and pictures online, he couldn't help but marvel at the sheer scale of the campus. They must have been racking in a lot of money to afford all of this, he imagined. But he couldn't get sidetracked. He had a mission. Well, this is it, Uraraka said, sounding nervous. Midoriya nodded. Yeah. The start of our journey. This is pretty nerve-wracking, huh? She rubbed the back of her head nervously. No kidding, he admitted. Despite living through war and combat, Midoriya would be lying if he said he wasn't feeling a tad nervous. After all, over 14 months of training and studying had been dedicated for the purpose of passing and being accepted into UA's hero course. He couldn't let it all be for nothing. He steeled himself and took a deep breath. Panicking would not resolve anything. He needed a clear mind to have the best chances of success. After all the studying on his own, and with Uraraka and Yaoyorozu recently, he was sure he'd pass the written portion. In addition, after all the training with All Might, he was feeling confident regarding his chances in the practical exam. However, he knew he was walking into unknown territory. What type of quirks might the other applicants have? It was quite possible that he'd be completely outclassed by some, if not most of them. Deep down, he wondered if he would even be able to keep up. The verdette shook his head to dispel those pessimistic thoughts. No. I can only focus on what I can do. I'll give it my all and let the chips fall where they may. A vibration from his phone snapped him out of his musings. He pulled it out and saw two messages. One was a message from Yayarozu in the group chat, and the other one from Coulson. Uraraka pulled out her phone as well. Yayarozu, good luck, you too. I know you will do well. I'll be cheering for you. Midoriya, thank you, Yamamo. We'll take all the power of friendship we can get. Uraraka outwardly snickered. Uraraka, carrot? Uraraka, face with tears of joy. Uraraka, you're the best, Yamamo. Hashtag friendship power. Yayarozu, hashtag friendship power, do your best. Plus ultra. Midoriya and Uraraka felt a bit of their previous tension melt away. Yayarozu had taken the recommendation entrance exam a week prior and had passed with flying colors. So, at least one of their trio was guaranteed a spot in the hero department. Midoriya took one last glance at his phone to see Coulson's text. Coulson, you'll do great today, Cap. Break records and turn heads. Midoriya couldn't help but smile at the agent's enthusiastic message. He could practically feel the agent's otaku-ness coming through the text. Still, he hoped S.H.I.E.L.D. would honor their agreement and not pull any strings. The verdette had made his desire to earn a spot in UA's hero program on his own very clear from the beginning of the mission. So far, they had seemingly honored it. However, if he smelled any foul play, he wouldn't be afraid to call them out on it. Anything wrong, Midori-kun? Uraraka asked, noticing her friend's serious expression. Oh no, I'm fine. Midoriya switched his phone off, placing it back in his pocket. Just got a text from a friend. That's all. Out of the way extras. Midoriya immediately recognized that brash voice. Turning around, his green eyes widened slightly. Bakugo? Bakugo furrowed his brows in confusion. Green hair? It's been a while. I had a feeling you'd be here. Good luck today. Midoriya held out his hand. Bakugo didn't acknowledge the handshake and sharpened his gaze. Midoriya realized that the ash blonde was sizing him up, although it didn't look like he wanted to fight. You've gotten taller. Bakugo tersely noted. And your Japanese is better. Midoriya pulled his hand back before he smirked. I couldn't stay as I was. Now could I? Bakugo didn't respond immediately. Whatever. It won't matter. He trudged past the verdette. I'll crush any obstacles in my way, especially you. As he stomped away, Midoriya shook his head. Seriously, what's his deal? What was that? Uraraka was confused over what she just witnessed. You know that guy, Midori-kun? Not really. He's the guy from that sludge villain incident, remember? The brunette's eyes widened when she remembered Midori-kun telling her that story. Then, why was he acting like such a jerk just now? Midoriya shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. He then returned his attention to the large gate. We should start heading inside now. Don't want to be late. Yeah, I guess we should. The pair proceeded through the gate with the other examinees. Their exam cards were hung around their necks via lanyards, allowing them entry onto the campus. Before entering through the main doors, Uraraka stopped and turned to Midoriya. Well, Midori-kun, she held out her fist. Best of luck? Midoriya smiled and fist bumped her back. Same to you, Uraraka-chan. Remember, all three of us are getting into the hero course together. She pumped her fist excitedly. Yamamo kept her end. Now we both gotta keep our ends. Right? Midoriya smiled and nodded. Right? Let's ace this thing. With that, they walked through the massive doorway and into the building. I can't waste this opportunity. I have to make it count. After following the signs, Midoriya and Uraraka arrived at a large auditorium reserved for the hero. Program's exam orientation. It had many levels of rows and seats, and there were already hundreds filling the room. The super soldier was impressed by how many applicants there were. And to think only 40 out of all these people will be accepted. Crazy. A message on a projected screen at the front directed students to sit at their assigned seats and not to touch the exam in front of them. Midoriya and Uraraka gave each other one last fist bump before heading toward their assigned seats. Thanks to his eidetic memory, he didn't need to double-check his exam card that had come in the day before. Exam ticket, examinee no, 7418. Test location, Battle Center B. Glancing at the row numbers on the outer seats, he determined that he'd be closer to the front of the auditorium. Descending down the stairs, he passed by a student with a bird for a head and a floating set of clothes. Meta abilities were certainly more varied nowadays, he thought. He was very tempted to break out one of his quirk notebooks and start jotting down as much info as he could, but restrained himself. After finding his row, he dropped his things at his designated seat near the center. He was sitting next to a short girl at 155 centimeters, 5 feet 1 inch, tall with a cute round face and a short equine muzzle, and had a mix of Asiatic and Caucasian features. Her face was framed by thick, wavy blonde hair reaching halfway down her back with shorter bangs hanging down her forehead. He noticed that her calves were similar to those of a horse, sported brown hooves for feet, and a short horse tail poked out behind her. Her notable features were her large, round blue eyes and the 2 tall, lyre-shaped horns on her head. Like him, she wasn't wearing a school uniform. Instead, she wore a light blue dress jacket over a white collar shirt, a blue dress skirt, and silver horseshoes on her hooves. Guess it wouldn't hurt to say hi, right? He thought. Lighten the mood and all. Hello. He tried. Hi. She shyly muttered. Nervous? He asked, smiling. Why? Just a little. She didn't look at him, keeping her gaze on the desk. How about you? She must be shy. I can relate. He then noticed something. There's definitely an accent in her voice too, right? Definitely. But I'm pretty eager to get started too. He figured it wouldn't hurt to ask what was on his mind. Forgive me for asking, are you a foreigner? The pony girl went stiff and turned away. Why's? She was expecting him to start mocking her. After all, foreign exchange students weren't always treated well in Japanese schools. He nodded. I thought so. I'm here from the States myself. That statement caught the girl's attention as she turned to face him, surprised. Really? Me too. Where from? California. Fresno, to be specific. Oh wow, that's cool. She shifted in her seat, letting her walls down. I'm Pony Tsunatori. Oh wait, my name is backwards over here. My bad. He chuckled. No worries. I get it. He raised an eyebrow. Pony? Like the horse? Why, she sweat dropped before shaking her head and holding out her hand. Sorry, let's start over. I'm Tsunatori Pony, from Austin, Texas. Midoriya took the hand, giving it a firm squeeze. I'm Midoriya Izuku. Nice to meet you, Tsunatori-san. Please is all mine, Midoriya-san. Oh, I can hear the accent in your voice too. She beamed. I've been told that I still have it. He chuckled a little before asking, so, what brought you to UA? Tsunatori perked up at the question, only to turn her gaze back to the table. I came here from Texas to live with my mom and get adjusted to living in Japan. I've always wanted to go to the same college that All Might went to. She laughed timidly and rubbed the base of her horns. Silly, isn't it? A foreigner trying to get into Japan's top hero program. Midoriya shook his head, smiling confidently. Oh, trust me, it's not. Pony looked back, her lips curling upward into a smile, her horse-like tail subconsciously swishing. Meanwhile, after finding her seat near the back of the auditorium, Uraraka scanned the crowd in the hope of finding Midoriya somewhere. She finally found him near the front rows, too far for her to call out to him. She then noticed that he was talking with a blonde, foreign-looking girl with horns on her head. They both seemed to be having an animated discussion, given their smiles. Uraraka blinked twice. Midori-kun seems to have made a new friend with another girl. She wasn't sure how to feel about that. The brunette, however, didn't have any more time to ponder on that thought. All right, boys and girls, this is your school DJ coming to you live from the monitoring room. A voice came from the loudspeakers. This is your official message to get rockin' on those tests in front of you. But no cheating. This is a hero course, so I'll be keeping a groovy eye on everyone here. You've got 2 hours to complete the written exam before we get to the main course. Your time begins right now. The monitor switched from the UA symbol to a digital countdown clock. and the auditorium was filled with the sounds of scratching pencils. Midoriya flipped his test over and swiftly began answering the questions. "Time's up. Pencils down," the voice said in thick English. Midoriya placed the pencil down and let out a deep breath he didn't even know he was holding. His test was complete, down to the last period. It was certainly harder than any test he had taken at his old public school or at the community college, that's for sure. UA University was not only the top hero academy in Japan, but it boasted some of the best academic scores in the nation for good reason. Nevertheless, he felt confident that he performed very well on it. All the time spent studying had paid off. Now, it would soon be time to take the practical portion. He imagined it was the most important part of the entrance exam. Moments later, the lights suddenly cut out with the exception of a spotlight shining onto the stage. Everyone's attention was drawn to a tall, slim man with long blonde hair spiked upwards, in addition to a small brown mustache. His outfit consisted of a black leather jacket with a tall collar, upturned and complete with studs, as well as matching black pants and knee-high boots. He sported tan shoulder pads, a red belt, and elbow pads, all of them studded, and lastly a pair of black fingerless gloves. His neck was obscured by what appeared to be a directional speaker which was likely used with his quirk. He also wore a pair of headphones with the word "Cage" written on the headband and a pair of orange-tinted shades. Midoriya's slightly eyes widened in recognition. "Oh, it's Present Mike, the voice hero. I thought I recognized that voice from somewhere." He had listened to a few of his podcasts before, noticing that he tended to combine English with his speech. Perhaps it was considered groovy to do that in Japan? "Welcome to today's live performance. Everyone say hey." "Hey!" Midoriya shouted with a wave. He then immediately realized that literally no one else in the auditorium responded to Mick's request. There were several moments of dead silence before a good portion of the room started laughing. Midoriya lowered his head, feeling his flush in embarrassment. Was I not supposed to answer? Was that part of the test? Did I fail already? He was confused. Next to him, Tsunatori patted his back reassuringly, giggling to herself. Bakugo, from his seat in the back rows, rolled his eyes in annoyance. "Stupid stealth guy Jin." Hiraka, at her seat, held her hand over her mouth in a futile attempt to contain her laughter. "He's such a cute dork." After getting the laughs out of their systems, the room soon quieted down once more. Present Mike didn't seem affected by the scene at all. If anything, he relished in it. "Hey, I got a live audience. Love it. Now, I'm here to present the guidelines of your practical exam. Are you ready?" "Yeah." Silence met his outcry as Midoriya made sure to stay quiet this time. He thought it was awkward, but Present Mike didn't seem to mind, still smiling a megawatt grin. "Now, like your application said, you're going to be throwing down in our super hit urban settings. That's right, boys and girls, you're going to be rocking out in this 10-minute mock battle." The screen behind Present Mike changed, showing a pseudo-map of the auditorium and 7 testing centers labeled AG. Midoriya sat up straighter and paid full attention to the presentation. "Gird your loins because after I drop the mic here, you'll be going to your specified battle centers. Sound good?" "Okay." When silence met him for a second time, the hero simply laughed it off. Snapping his fingers, the screen changed again. "All right, let's check out your targets. You'll have to face 3 different kinds of robots, which we've named foe villains. These guys are worth 1, 2, or 3 points each, depending on their model. You'll need to destroy as many of these foe villains as possible with your quirks and get all those sweet points. But check it," he warned, "make sure you're keeping things heroic. Attacking other examinees is the biggest no-no that we have. Make sense?" Midoriya nodded. No sense in becoming a hero if you're just going to attack people? The verdette could have sworn he heard someone in the back rows groan with his keen hearing. Who was that? He didn't get the opportunity to wonder though. "Excuse me, sir, I have a question." Present Mick's grin widened at the attention. "Hit me." A spotlight shined down on a tall, muscular student wearing glasses, with his hand raised standing several rows behind Midoriya. "On the printout there are 4 types of villains, yet you say that there are 3. With all due respect, if this is an error then it is a great disservice to us and the reputation of UA. We are exemplary students, so we expect the best from Japan's most notable university. Midoriya glanced down at his printout to confirm the tall examinee's point. Good catch, glasses. Still, coming on a little too high-strung there, aren't you? He wondered if this guy was a soldier too given how straight his posture was and how uptight he seemed to be. All right, Present Mike said, silencing the hall. Examinee 7111. Thanks for calling in with your request. He gave him a thumbs up. But it is not an error. The fourth villain type is worth 0 points. Midoriya blinked, cocking an eyebrow. Weird. What was the point in having a faux villain not worth any points? That guy is the thwomp to your chances. Very old video game reference, by the way. Anyone catch it? Present Mike asked with a cheeky grin. No one in the audience did, except for one. It's Super Mario Brothers. The super soldier exclaimed internally. Why did they ever allow that franchise to die? I do. Midoriya stood up in his excitement, and a spotlight shined down on him too. He blanched when he realized he had unintentionally spoken out again and was literally under the limelight. He quickly sank back into his seat, holding his head low. I understood that reference. This earned the verdette more laughter from the audience, and an annoyed growl from Glasses for disrupting the presentation. Pony gave him another shoulder pat while snickering. He shot her an appreciative look, quietly mumbling, Schrader? Pff. Meanwhile, Uraraka couldn't contain her laughter as she held her sides. This guy's gonna kill me. Midoriya sighed deeply. So much for any potential social life at school. Even if he passed, he was sure that this was what he'd be remembered for. The guy who embarrassed himself twice in the exam orientation. Some things just never change, I guess. Present Mike continued grinning brightly. I got a fellow retro gamer in the crowd. But I digress. Anyways, this faux villain will just be there to get in your way. There's one in every battle center. It's not impossible to beat it, but you're on the clock and there's really no point. I recommend that my listeners ignore it and focus on the ones topping the charts. Thank you. With his question answered, Glasses gave a polite bow and sat back down. The spotlights on both Glasses and Midoriya turned off. Midoriya overheard a few students whispering amongst themselves how it was like a video game. The points, the boss, and the whole shebang was set up like one. It sort of reminded Midoriya of the military games he played while training in the army. That's all for today, listeners. Head to your battle centers with a little gift, a sample of our school motto. Present Mike continued on. As General Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is one who overcomes life's misfortunes. Now that's one tasty soundbite. Midoriya nodded in agreement. True words indeed. Mike cocked an eyebrow, eyeing everyone expectantly. So, you ready to go beyond? Let me hear a plus ultra. Silence. Okay. Good luck. Midoriya blinked twice, dumbfounded by Mick's earlier exclamation. Wait, did he really just say, but how? Questions for later, he supposed. The bus ride to the battle arena was quick, yet uncomfortable and noisy. Examinees were smushed together shoulder to shoulder, and some of the boisterous ones started talking loudly, either bragging about themselves or trying to psych out perceived weak targets. Midoriya paid no mind to it, focusing on the task ahead. When the bus came to a stop, he disembarked as quickly as possible. The verdette took a brief moment to marvel at how big UA's campus truly was. They really had to have a lot of money to afford all of this. Earlier, after leaving the auditorium and wishing Tsunatori the best of luck, he headed to one of the designated locker rooms to change. His outfit was a cyan tracksuit with white accents and a new pair of red combat boots since his old ones had been worn out from training. He had also removed his 200 kilograms, 441 pounds, ankle and wrist weights for the first time in months. The feeling of relief was instant. He couldn't ever remember feeling so light. He felt like he could jump over an entire building in one leap. Of course, he knew he realistically couldn't do that, but he sure felt like he could. Strapped across Midoriya's chest was a double-banded harness with the unpainted shield attached to the back via a magnet. Days before the exam, he was required to fill out paperwork for him to use the shield in the exam, classifying it as a support item. Thankfully, the university approved his request. He didn't think he couldn't pass without it, but having it certainly made things much easier for him. He could overhear a few examinees talking about him behind his back. Isn't that the guy who made an idiot of himself at orientation? Yeah, that's him. Can't mistake that green hair. Is that a shield on his back? Looks like it. Kinda plain, huh? Is that all he has? What's he planning to do with just that? Something to do with his quirk maybe? Who knows? Maybe defense is all he's got? Lame. One less contestant to worry about then. Midoriya couldn't help but roll his eyes at their comments. Already underestimating their competition. Not smart. The crowd outside the arena was steadily growing as more examinees filed out of the buses. Looking around, he spotted a set of horns sticking out of the crowd. Tsunatori seemed to be in a conversation with a fairly attractive, athletic-looking woman with long, bright orange hair. He was mildly surprised they both were in the same battle center. Crazy coincidence, he thought. He was tempted to go talk to them but decided against it. No, I can try to talk with Tsunatori-san later. Need to get my head in the game now. No distractions. He proceeded to the front of the crowd toward the set of large metal doors. Taking a deep breath, Midoriya knelt down into a sprinter's stance, digging the soles of his boots into the concrete surface and pressing his fingers down. He could hear other examinees jostling about, some talking themselves up, bragging about how easy the test was going to be. He managed to block out most of it, drowning out their white noise with his own calming thoughts. The sound of a revving engine nearby caught his attention. Turning to his side, he was mildly surprised to find the tall student with glasses standing next to him. He too was focused on the large door to the arena. Following the sound closer, he confirmed it was coming from his legs. His calves had several muffler pipes sticking out. Midoriya blinked and momentarily fell into his habit of quirk analysis. Did he have some type of motor or engine ability? Did it make him faster or something along those lines? Getting a better look at the muscular teen, he stood 180 centimeters, 5 feet 11 inches, tall, had short dark blue hair, an impressive jaw, and squarish-shaped eyes with glasses. Ah, it's you. Glasses turned to Midoriya with a serious expression. This guy has to be, or at least was in the military at some point, right? Midoriya wondered. There's no way he's normally like this, right? You're the one who disrupted orientation with your joking. Please try to refrain from distracting me and everyone else. Some of us here are actually taking this exam seriously. He tersely stated. He thinks I was doing that on purpose? Well, I don't have time to explain myself, nor do I need to right now. Midoriya thought pensively. I've got my own mission to worry about. Believe me, I'm taking this very seriously. Midoriya countered. Best of luck to you though. Glasses glanced at the verdette, briefly surprised by how serious Midoriya sounded and his stone-faced expression. It almost reminded him of his elder brother when he got serious. Shaking his head, he turned forward to concentrate on the trial ahead. Midoriya refocused on the large metal door, waiting for the signal. A countdown, a loud horn, a green start flag, a starter pistol, a flare, he wasn't sure. He just needed to be ready for anything. The doors then opened, revealing a section of cityscape that could have fit in just about anywhere in Japan. Is this the signal? Okay, start. Present Mick's voice boomed out from a guard tower nearby the gate. What? There are no countdowns in real fights. The die has been cast, go. You're already behind. As the voice hero berated the group for hesitating, Midoriya had already dashed forward at full speed past the large doors while the other applicants looked up at the tower broadcasting the hero's explanation. Running into the arena, Midoriya immediately began scanning for targets. He could hear the other examinees charging in not too far behind him. Won't take them long to catch up. Need to capitalize and take out as many targets as I can? He internally rationalized. Turning a corner, Midoriya found 3 large, green robots in the street. A 3-pointer and 2 2-pointers in close proximity to each other. How convenient. Without slowing down, he reached back for his shield, swiftly determined the optimal throw, and flung it to the right. Bouncing off a nearby parked car, the shield's trajectory sent it tearing through both 2-pointers' heads. Rebounding off a nearby building, the shield came flying back to Midoriya's outstretched left hand. Using the disabled 2-pointers as a springboard, the Verdette launched himself at the larger 3-pointer. Twisting himself in midair, he used his gathered momentum to fling the shield vertically at the larger mech, which tore through its armor like paper. These things really are made to be broken? He mused. The robot collapsed backwards from the force behind the hit with the disc stuck inside its head unit. Timing it perfectly, Midia landed on the deactivated mech just as it fell. Quickly reclaiming the shield, he jumped off and continued running down the street. Alright, that makes for 7 points. Turning down a different street, a 1-pointer spotted him and started racing toward him. Spotting the robot out of the corner of his eye, Midia leaped to the side to dodge a hit in the nick of time. He instantly reacted by jumping up to deliver a powerful kick, sending the robot's head flying across the street. The super soldier was momentarily surprised by how easy it was, not feeling much resistance, before rushing down the street. 8 points. Let's keep this going. Bolting further down the street, a 2-pointer turned a corner, spotted Midia, and charged at him. Come at me. Just as he was about to throw the shield, Glasses rushed in at incredible speed out of nowhere and delivered a devastating kick into the 2-pointer. Its armor was instantly crushed as it collapsed to the ground, deactivated. Midia immediately stopped, lowering the shield. Both examinees briefly looked at each other before Glasses rushed down the street, leaving dust in his wake. The Verdette glanced down at the destroyed 2-pointer and came to a realization. Okay, I need the high ground so I can spot more targets. If I stay on the streets, the other examinees will just catch up and there won't be many points left for me. He broke off into a run, keeping watch for any more robots and ways of quickly getting up to the rooftops. Down a nearby alley, he spotted a fire escape hanging off a fake office building and immediately changed course. Gathering enough speed, he bent his knees and leapt nearly 9 meters, 30 feet, into the air and grabbed onto the fire escape's railing. Pulling himself over, he climbed up the graded steps and after reaching the top level he jumped to grab onto the building's ledge. Pulling himself up onto the roof, he ran across and stopped at the other side, scanning the area for targets. He could hear the other examinees spreading out across the area and destroying the faux villains, if the sounds of crushing metal and explosions were any indication. After a moment he spotted a large gathering of robots off in one section of the cityscape that none of the other examinees had reached yet. Better get over there fast. Taking a few steps back, Midia jumped to the other building. In the observation room, a dark room filled with monitors, UA faculty members sat watching the test unfold. The screens switched to different areas of the 7 arenas, allowing the group to have an uninterrupted view of the applicants. Doesn't this year's group look promising? Midnight pointed out. A few murmurs of agreement echoed in the room. One screen showed a scene that immediately caught Powerloader's eye. Hold on, focus on screen 18 really quick. The screen grew bigger, allowing the faculty to see Midia fluidly jumping from rooftop to rooftop. Performing acrobatic flips, he threw the shield at the faux villains in the streets. Below. Amazingly, the shield would crush the mech's head units on impact, instantly deactivating them, before somehow always ricocheting on a path back within Midia's reach. That support item he's using, Powerloader marveled, I've never seen anything like that before. He rubbed his chin under his helmet. And I've been in the support business a long time. Is it part of his quirk? Vlad King asked. Ectoplasm pulled up an electronic file. Examine 7418, Midia Izuku. His quirk is registered as an augmentation type, so, no, not likely. The support item itself is labeled as a shield in his paperwork. That thing is more than a shield. Snipe argued. It's a weapon. Look at how it's tearing through the faux villains like tinfoil. Yet it's bouncing off them like rubber. I'd be curious to know what it's made of. Powerloader said with an impressed air. The way he's handling it is quite impressive as well. Cementos commented. He certainly knows how to use it. Yagi, in his shrunken form, wore a baggy yellow pinstripe suit. He looked at the screen with a grin. He's also getting around the city pretty well too. The kid's definitely skilled. Is it even fair to have an item like that in the test? 13 wondered. I mean, it isn't related to his quirk, right? At the back of the room in the shadows, Aizawa leaned against the wall with his arms folded over his chest. His tired eyes and haggard appearance made it look as though he hadn't slept in days, and with the upcoming new semester, that was likely true. His tired yet analytical gaze focused on Midoriya's screen as he remained silent. A small, white-furred creature that, had it not been wearing a suit, would have been mistaken for a large mouse, a dog, or a very small bear. Whatever he was, took a sip of tea and grinned knowingly. "I don't see any reason why not," the UA Dean of Heroics, Nizu, stated in a calm but high-pitched voice. "Whether it accentuates his quirk or not is irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. So long as he knows how to properly use it, which he seems to do, I'll allow it. A hero's support gear shouldn't be limited to something only related to their quirk, right?" Vlad King concurred with a nod. Aizawa back there can attest to that with his capture scarves. Aizawa didn't respond, still watching the monitors. 13 nodded, and conceded, "Fair points." Nizu took another sip of tea before continuing. "Besides, whether one has a useful support item or not, the practical exam is not any less difficult. Examinees have not been informed of the number of villains or their locations. They have a very limited amount of time to cover a large area, so they are forced to find different methods to draw the faux villains out." He paused and flipped through several channels, stopping on a screen with a silver-haired man with multiple appendages, scanning the horizon, gathering information to better understand the situation before anyone else. The screen changed to show a tall and muscular, bespectacled examinee rocketing down the road and crushing targets with devastating kicks. It then shifted to display a floating brunette with pink cheeks jumping in between buildings, searching the area for targets. Mobility that can be used in many different circumstances. The screen changed again to display a flashy blonde man blasting a robot apart via a laser from his stomach, looking very lax in the process. Keeping calm under pressure, the next screen showed another blonde, feral-looking young man standing on a pile of broken machines, smoke billowing from his hands. And, of course, pure combat ability. These abilities are needed to keep peace in the streets. Nizu smiled. Examinees who use a combination of all of these tactics are typically the most successful and rack up the highest scores. "Well," Snipe spoke up, "we can't know yet how good this group really is. Their true test is yet to come." He paused to press a big red button. "And how they react to an overwhelming threat will show their true nature." Uraraka groaned as she leaned against her most recent pile of faux villains, all one-pointers. She was thankful that she had her sweatband, otherwise, sweat would be in her eyes. Her outfit consisted of a simple black jogging suit with pink accents and pink running shoes. Her long hair was tied up into a bun to keep it out of the way. She rubbed her stomach, taking a few moments to catch her breath and give her stomach time to settle. Midoriya had previously suggested during one of their study sessions that she could use her quirk on herself to get around much faster than running. However, she had to be careful where she pushed off while in the air, so she wouldn't float herself too high. So far, she was doing quite well in covering ground and using her quirk to float the robots before sending them crashing to the ground. However, the constant on and off use of her quirk on top of her breakneck pace was taking its toll. Everyone is trying so hard to get the higher point bots, they're leaving the one-pointers alone. "I can't keep settling for this," Uraraka realized. "Need to change up strategies." 2 minutes remaining. Present Mike shouted over the speakers. "Better hurry up and rack up those points." Uraraka suddenly became alert. The test was almost over already? She only had 28 points. She needed to get more. She had to land that top 3 scholarship. Smacking her cheeks, Uraraka straightened herself up. "Okay, no plans. Just pick a direction and get as many points as you can before the buzzer." The brunette bolted down the street, but only got a few meters before the ground beneath her feet rumbled. What's going W? She didn't complete her sentence as she and several other applicants were thrown to the ground as the concrete in front of them exploded into dust. Steel beams twisted and tore, and shattered glass rained down in the wake of a giant green automaton. The zero-pointer towered over the buildings, easily crushing them as its treads pulled forward. Uraraka stared up in horrified awe at the mechanical monster. "Are you kidding me? That's the zero-pointer?" I thought it'd be the same size as the other ones. Even though she was around 20 meters, 65 feet, away, she could feel the Titan rolling down the street as it crushed everything in its wake. She let out a sigh of relief to see that it wasn't heading in her direction. As she was about to run in a new direction to find more, she noticed a couple of examinees in the zero-pointer's path. They were frozen, looking up at the incoming mass of metal in horror. More importantly, not turning around and running for their lives like everyone else. Hey, you guys need to run. Neither of the applicants moved. Were they too scared? Uraraka looked between the zero-pointer, still rolling towards them, and the two terrified students. It would stop before running over them, right? UA wouldn't allow anything like that to happen, right? She looked back and forth between the robot and petrified students. What should she do? Well, my body moved on its own. I couldn't just stand there and watch that guy die. Midori-kun's words echoed in her mind. She blinked, realizing what she needed to do. Be just like Midori-kun. With a scream, Uraraka willed herself forward and broke off into a sprint. Slapping a hand to her thigh, she kicked off the ground and rocketed down the street. It was going to be a close call. As she was about to pass the two examinees, she grabbed them to both remove their gravity and pull them away by their shirts. As a result, all three went flying across the street together and narrowly avoided the zero-pointer as it rolled over the spot the two students had previously been. Feeling her stomach twist and confident they were far enough away, she touched her fingers together. Release. Gravity's effect returned as the three hit the ground and tumbled across the street. With a pained grunt, Uraraka willed herself off the ground. That was a close call. It worked out though. She was about to ask if the other two examinees were okay, but noticed they were looking behind her. Curious, she looked back and was horrified to see the zero-pointer looking straight at them. It then shifted its treads and began heading in their direction. Uraraka blinked and gulped loudly. Oh crap. She turned to the examinees. You both run now. Nodding, the two scrambled to their feet and ran away. At the same time, Uraraka pivoted and took off down a perpendicular street just in time to avoid a giant mechanical fist crashing down. Though she avoided the main hit, she was caught up in the shockwave which sent her flying and tumbling across the pavement. Coughing, Uraraka struggled to return to her feet. The dust cloud kicked up from the punch burned her eyes and coated her throat, making it harder for her to catch her breath. Spitting out globs of spit and dust, Uraraka stood on wobbly legs while at the same time the zero-pointer began to slowly pull its arms back. Have to put some distance between us. It's powerful but slow. Just need to get dash. Uraraka couldn't complete her thought as several red glowing lights pierced through the dust. She was not alone. Crap, where'd all these guys come from? When the faux villains broke through the dust and charged at Uraraka, she gave a startled yelp while dodging and weaving around them, trying to keep an eye on the zero-pointer. If I didn't have to worry about the stupid zero-pointer, this would be a great group to get points from. Uraraka rolled under a wild swing from a two-pointer. Stupid monster. Why is it trying to crush me anyway? The gravity girl was then struck with an idea. Glancing back up, seeing the zero-pointer pulling its arm back, Uraraka narrowed her eyes and set her jaw in determination. You can do this, Ochako. Diving forward and scrambling between as many faux villains as she could, Uraraka floated them while being careful not to push them away. She needed them in one place around her. Taking inventory, it looked like there were 2 of each robot model worth points present, making 12 total points. Perfect. After floating the last robot, she heard the zero-pointer's arm lock into place as gears and pistons strained under its own weight. It was now or never. Pressing her fingers into her thigh, she kicked off the ground as hard as she could. She floated away from the zero-pointer just as it pulverized the area she had just been. It destroyed everything, the road, the buildings, and the robots. She believed that she was in the clear until the shockwave slammed into her, sending her spinning through the air across the cityscape. Unable to control herself, she eventually slammed into the side of a building, knocking the air out of her. Ow! Dizzy swirls filled Uraraka's eyes. Dazed and out of breath, she looked back to see if she was a safe distance from the zero-pointer now. After taking a moment to catch her breath, she let out a sigh of relief. "'Kay, out of danger for now. Need to focus on getting more dash. Time's up. You'd better hope that you earned enough points." Present Mike shouted over the speaker. "Or not. Still, 40 points is good, right?" Uraraka sighed, pushing herself down and calmly floating back to the street. Pressing her fingers together and mumbling, "Release," Uraraka felt her gravity return. She stood tall and proud now that she had completed the entrance exam. And Uraraka, after a few seconds, promptly fell to her knees and proudly vomited. Midoriya jumped from building to building, swiftly scanning the city in search of any foe villains that hadn't been destroyed by his fellow examinees yet. As he suspected, the number of remaining robots was beginning to dwindle fast. Spotting a smaller robot driving out of an alley, he twisted around to throw his shield at it. It crushed the head like tinfoil before bouncing off a nearby car and street lamp to return to his hand before his feet even hit the ground. One glance at the robot's remains and he spotted the giant one painted on it. "That's 37 points so far," he thought. "This area is mostly cleaned out. Better head east?" Taking a sharp turn, he cleared several buildings before jumping over a small street. While in midair, he was taken off guard to see Tsunatori flying past him. Safely landing on the adjacent building, he paused to look at her. She was flying on a pair of horns, just like the ones on her head. Several untouched foe villains were down the street. Getting close, she came to a stop while standing on her levitating horns. "Thunderhorn!" He heard her exclaim before an onslaught of horns shot out of her head, reducing the robots to scrap metal. Midoriya blinked before an excited grin crossed his face. "But she can use her horns to fly and instantly regrow more for a barrage attack. That's so cool. I gotta ask her about her quirk later." Suddenly, a two-pointer zoomed out from around a corner and targeted Tsunatori while she was turned away. She was close enough to the ground, and well within the robot's reach. Midoriya instinctively tossed the shield forward. Tsunatori turned around just in time to see the two-pointer's scorpion-like head decapitated by a silver disc. The disc bounced off the asphalt, off a nearby tree, and then back to Midoriya's left hand. Midoriya gave Tsunatori a salute before rushing off across the roof. Tsunatori blinked. What was that support item Midoriya was using? That was so cool. She'd have to ask him about it later, if she saw him again. The super soldier continued jumping across roofs and looking for more targets. "I'm at 39 points now. There can't be much time left in the exam. Do I have enough?" 2 minutes remaining. Present Mike shouted over the speakers. "Better hurry up and rack up those points. More points it is then." However, before Midoriya could continue hunting for more robots, the ground shuddered. At first, he thought it was an earthquake, but the way the shaking continued clued him in that it was something else. Suddenly, a nearby building exploded as a massive green robot emerged into view. Midoriya's eyes widened as he recognized the mech's design. "That's the zero-pointer?" He backed away in shock. "It's just an exam. That thing is way overkill." Several buildings near the giant mech suddenly collapsed as its giant treads started moving. It crushes buildings just from moving. Gotta make sure no one's in its way. Turning around, Midoriya headed back to the street the zero-pointer was rolling down. He stopped at a ledge to look down. All around, examinees abandoned their positions and ran for their lives. Like Present Mike said, there was no point in trying to fight the zero-pointer. While quickly scanning the area, he spotted something moving under some rubble, or rather, someone. It was Tsunatori, trapped up to her waist by heavy chunks of debris. She must have been caught off guard by the zero-pointer's activation like everyone else was. He saw the pained look on her face, weakly struggling to free herself from the massive machine that was preparing to crush her under its treads. No one was around her to help as they ran away in fear. Midoriya didn't hesitate. Placing his shield on his back, he broke off into a mad dash and cleared a couple buildings before jumping off the ledge to the street below. He grabbed onto a street lamp to take away some of his fall and swung himself further down the road. He landed in a crouching position before taking off toward Tsunatori. "I've got you, Tsunatori." The verdette rushed up to her and carefully removed the rubble pinning her down. "Can you stand?" The blonde equine girl grimaced. "No. I think my leg is broken. She looked at her swollen left leg. Don't worry, I'm getting you out of here, he told her while picking her up in a princess carry, bolting down the street away from the machine. Tsunatori was surprised by how fast Midoriya was running. She was reminded of the tall, glasses-wearing applicant running around from earlier. After swiftly running a kilometer, 0.6 mile, down the street close to the entrance, Midoriya carefully laid Tsunatori down to lean against a building. You should be safe here. Can you still use your horns? He asked. Tsunatori weakly nodded. Why, a little bit, I think. He nodded. Okay, if you have to, you can use those to defend yourself from any more foe villains that come your way. I gotta go back. Why? She asked, confused. I'm going to stop that thing from hurting any other examinees. He turned and bolted down the street. Wait. Why? The blonde tried to ask the verdette. Midoriya-san, there aren't any points for beating it. The points don't matter. Midoriya yelled back while running. If you can do something that'll help others, even if it doesn't benefit you, then a hero should do it. With that said, he was out of range and the equine girl could only stare at his back as he ran. He's right, she mumbled to herself. So cool. Midoriya dashed down the street back to the zero-pointer, which was rolling across the city, crushing anything in its path. He carefully studied the mech for any obvious weaknesses. He could try to disable the treads but didn't want to risk getting himself injured from the massive gears. He could target the joints and break them, but the robot would likely swipe him off before he could deal any noteworthy damage. An idea occurred to him as he looked up at the robot's blockish head. Wait, it's still a robot. It needs a processor to operate. If I can break that before it notices me? With a plan in mind, Midoriya increased his running speed and jumped when he was in range of the mech. The zero-pointer didn't seem to notice him yet as he leaped onto a part of its leg above the giant treads. He carefully scaled up the robot using the armor grooves as footholds and handholds. To stay out of the robot's vision, he shifted to scale up its back and reached its shoulder area before ascending to the back of the head. After pulling himself onto the flatter part of the zero-pointer's shoulder, he took a few deep breaths. If Midoriya had any fear of heights, he didn't let it show. He pulled the shield off his back, slipped his left arm through its straps, and smashed the edge into the metal plating. The armor was torn easily and allowed Midoriya to rip it apart further so he could climb into the robot's head. All around him, there was a mass plethora of wiring and mechanisms, and he had no clue how they functioned. Well, better just start breaking stuff. With that, the verdette started smashing whatever he could around him using his fists, kicks, and the shield. Meanwhile, on the outside, the zero-pointer stopped in its tracks and its limbs began to spaz out of control, knocking a building over in the process. Tearing through more wires, Midoriya spotted a large black block the size of a car with flashing lights, giving off a lot of heat. That's gotta be the CPU. He pushed his way through, lifted the shield above his head, and slammed it through the block. A shower of electrical sparks went flying and the lights immediately shut off. As a result, the robot instantly stopped moving and its red eyes went black. It remained frozen for a short moment until it slumped down, collapsing face forward to the ground dead. Crap, crap, crap. Midoriya held onto ropes of wires, bracing himself, feeling the mech falling forward. The street was crushed under the zero-pointer's massive weight, and even a few nearby buildings crumbled away, throwing up a large dust cloud. Thankfully, no one had been around the machine as it collapsed. From a safe distance, examinees looked on in shocked confusion at the fallen zero-pointer. What happened? Why did it all of a sudden stop working and collapse? As the dust settled, Midoriya used his shield to bust a hole through the zero-pointer's armored head. He carefully climbed out and jumped down to the crumbled street below. He took a few deep breaths and glanced over the fallen robot, confident that it would not suddenly reactivate. Now he understood why the zero-pointer was a gimmick. It was ridiculously huge at 100 feet tall, and it would take a very specific quirk or overwhelming force to truly stop it. Or just someone crafty enough to sneak inside its head and destroy the CPU. He shook his head and frowned. Tsunatori-san could have been killed by this thing. How could they allow something like the zero-pointer to run loose? It's just a test. Midoriya-san. The super soldier turned around to see Tsunatori floating, using her horns to hold her up by her armpits. Are you okay? Why? Just a few scratches. He waved off her worry casually. Realizing that the exam was still ongoing, he adopted a serious expression. If you can still use your horns, you should try and get a few more points dash. He was interrupted by a loud buzzer and then present Mick's voice. Time's up. You'd better hope that you earned enough points. Or not, Midoriya said glumly and turned to the equine girl. How many did you get? 45. Midoriya was slightly taken aback. Whoa, she killed it. Had she not gotten caught up in the zero-pointer's path, she likely would have gotten more. What about you? She asked. 39. I guess we'll just have to wait and see if we got in. Yeah. She then shook her head and looked at him with wide eyes. Did you seriously just take down the zero-pointer just now? Yeah, no big deal. He shrugged. Just wrecked its hard drive? He jerked his thumb toward the hole he made getting out of the robot's head. That's so cool. By the way, can I ask you about Dash? Excuse me? Both the blonde and Verdette turned and saw a little old lady standing behind them. She wore a white doctor's coat and was leaning heavily on a cane. You both can chat, but only while I fix you up. Midoriya looked at her for a moment before his eyes widened in recognition. Oh, I remember, you're the youthful heroine, recovery girl. Right? He remembered her from reading up on UA's heroic department faculty staff from last semester. Yes, I am. Now sit down. Her stern voice was enough to make Midoriya sit down next to Tsunatori, who lowered herself to the ground with her horns. The recovery girl pointed at Tsunatori. Tell me where it hurts. Tsunatori blinked in bewilderment. I think I broke my leg. She pointed at her left leg, grimacing. It's pretty swollen, and it hurts. Midoriya glanced at her in worry. All that pain and she still came to check on me? Recovery girl nodded. Easy fix. Hold still, dear. She leaned forward and kissed Tsunatori's forehead. 10 seconds. The girl looked much better, though she seemed to be fighting off drowsiness now. My quirk speeds up the healing process, but you'll be tired for a while. Still, that's an impressive ability. Midoriya complimented, awed at seeing a broken leg healed within seconds. Thank you. And you, young man, what's the damage? Just a few scratches. Nothing serious. Good, that means I don't have to do anything. Recovery girl smiled. Tiny injuries like that are best left to heal on their own. Just don't do anything crazy for a day or two. Actually, mine will probably be gone by the time I get home. Midoriya inwardly mused. Now, if you'll excuse me, there are others who need my attention. After recovery girl hobbled away, Midoriya and Tsunatori let out breaths they didn't know they'd been holding. She's kinda scary, Tsunatori said quietly. She's... He turned to her. Hey, before she showed up, you were about to say something? The blonde perked up a bit. I was about to ask you about your support item and your quirk, if that's okay. Well, in reverse order, my quirk is called Augment. Like its name suggests, every part of my body is enhanced, especially my strength. As for the shield, he pulled it off its magnet carrier and showed it to her. It's something that's been in my family for a while. Don't know what it's made of, but it's pretty strong and vibration absorbent. He hated lying, but he didn't have much choice. That's cool. Tsunatori beamed. Your quirk and the way you used your shield reminds me a lot of Captain America, actually. Yeah, I have been told that before a few times. Not sure I even come close to him though. He chuckled bashfully while rubbing his neck. What's your quirk, Tsunatori-san? The way you used your horns was pretty cool. Oh, my quirk is horn cannon. She happily explained. I can launch my horns and grow back a new set instantly. I can telekinetically control up to 4 of them at a time and shoot a barrage of them, but that does drain my stamina though. That's impressive. Midoriya complimented. You'll be an excellent long-range fighter, and you can use your horns to help you fly. That's a big plus. If you can learn to balance yourself on one horn, you'll have 3 extras to use for attacking or assisting someone. He paused to quickly look over Tsunatori's horns. Given their shape, you can also pierce or pin down enemies too. Tsunatori's tail swished from the praise, and nodded. I have been working on trying to fly with one horn. It's a little challenging. You could also try increasing the number of how many horns you can control, he suggested. That may help. Tsunatori nodded. Yeah, I'm still working on that too. She smiled up at Midoriya. By the way, thank you for saving me back there. Midoriya smiled. No problem. He looked toward the entrance to see examinees gathering around it where Recovery Girl could use her quirk on anyone who needed healing. I guess we should start heading out. Midoriya and Tsunatori walked back and continued to chat. The pair said goodbye and wished each other luck before boarding their respective buses. After saying goodbye to Tsunatori, Midoriya went back to the locker room to get changed and met up with Uraraka at the front gate. They walked back to the train station together, glad that neither of them had gotten seriously hurt during the exam. So, how do you think you did? Midoriya asked. Well, I think I did good on the written part. Uraraka smiled. All the studying we did together with Yamamo really helped me out. So, thank you for your help on that. My pleasure. The freckle-faced man nodded. I think I did pretty well on the written exam too. Never had to take a test that hard in America, so all that extra studying paid off. He then asked, how about the practical part? I got 40 points? She said proudly. I got beat by Tsunatori-san and Uraraka-chan. Midoriya internally commented. Though their abilities do allow them to cover areas faster than I can on foot, especially in a cityscape environment. Plus, they can both take out things like those robots faster than I can with just my shield and my punches. He internally rationalized. So, I can't be too upset about it. Though, Uraraka turned away looking sheepish, I kinda overused my quirk and made myself sick, and got bruised up too. Are you okay? Midoriya asked, sounding concerned. He remembered her telling him that overusing her quirk caused her nausea. It had to do with her equilibrium being out of whack. Oh, I'm fine. She quickly reassured him. Recovery Girl was able to heal me up, no sweat. That's good. He sounded relieved. 40 points is really good. Great job. Thanks. She then looked up at Midoriya curiously. What about you? How many points did you get, Midori-kun? 39. Uraraka blinked twice and stared at him. Whoa, a 1-point difference. That's crazy. What? Is something wrong? What was with that look on her face? Oh, nothing. It's just, I thought you would have scored more. Realizing how that could be taken, she frantically waved her hands out. Not that I think you didn't try or anything, I'm sure you did your best. It's okay. Midoriya shrugged, sighing. I had to get around by jumping across rooftops so I could cover more area and spot more targets from up high. That was smart. I was doing something similar actually. Uraraka grinned. Great minds think alike, I guess. But the other examinees sometimes still got to the faux villains before me, especially that uptight guy with the glasses. He was pretty fast. Also, he sheepishly scratched his cheek. I spent the last 2 minutes taking down the 0-pointer, so that didn't help my cause either. Uraraka stopped and looked at him in shocked disbelief. What? Wait, time out. Why you took out the 0-pointer? Midoriya nodded, nonchalant. Yeah. By the time it was deactivated, I had already run out the clock. What? What? Uraraka was speechless. The damage that metal monstrosity caused by punching and just moving around flashed through her head. Hold on, she sputtered out. How did you take out the 0-pointer? That thing was huge. She then had a thought. Wait, his quirk is an enhancer type. So maybe? Did you punch it? She exclaimed, wide-eyed. What? Midoriya cocked an eyebrow, bemused. Punch it? Yeah. Did you enhance your arm to the max and punch it with everything you had, or something like that? Uraraka yelled, looking up at the verdette expectantly. I bet you took it out with one hit, right? She sure has a wild imagination. He didn't immediately respond to that. He started to laugh a bit. No, it wasn't anything that flashy. I'm not all might strong after all. Oh, so then how? She inquired, confused. He shrugged. I just climbed up to its head, got inside it, and started wrecking stuff until it stopped. Nothing fancy. Uraraka blinked twice. So, you climbed up it? Yep. And it didn't notice you? I went up its back where it couldn't see me, so no? And you just broke it from the inside? Midoriya nodded. That's what happened. Actually, that does make a lot more sense now that I think about it. Uraraka thought, feeling slightly embarrassed. Midoriya smiled sheepishly and patted her shoulder. Sorry to disappoint, Uraraka-chan. Didn't mean to crush your fantasy. No. She quickly responded. It's not that. If it works, it works. Great job. Another thought crossed her mind. Wait, Midori-kun, why did you try to stop the zero-pointer anyway? I saw someone get trapped under the rubble it created when it appeared. It was actually the girl I was sitting next to in orientation, believe it or not. Midoriya explained. Oh yeah, that blonde girl with the horns? She still wasn't sure how to feel about that interaction. Uraraka certainly wasn't opposed to Midoriya making more friends, but it just felt weird when he was talking so casually around other girls. She shook her head, dispelling those nonsensical thoughts, and continued to listen to her friend. I rescued her and got her out of harm's way. But seeing how she was nearly killed by the falling debris, he frowned. I couldn't stand by and let that thing endanger anyone else. Uraraka stared at him for a moment before a warm smile crossed her face. Putting others before yourself, huh? You really are a hero, Midori-kun. Oh, thanks, he blushed lightly. Uraraka then thought of her own encounter with the zero-pointer. I don't regret saving those two students at all, but I did hesitate. Meanwhile, Midori-kun rushed in to save someone and take down the zero-pointer too, all without a second thought. He's amazing. She frowned slightly. I still have a lot of work to do. Everything okay, Uraraka-chan? Oh, fine. She waved off, smiling. Just thinking. The zero-gravity girl decided to switch topics. By the way, are you hungry, Midori-kun? Midoriya's stomach rumbled loudly as if to answer Uraraka's question. Uraraka snorted with laughter. Guess that answers that. Hell, he felt his face flush in embarrassment. Yeah, looks like I burned through my breakfast. It was already past 1300 hours, 1 p.m., so he could definitely use some lunch. Why don't we go home, and I can make us something? Uraraka offered. We can call Yamamo and tell her how we did too. Midoriya nodded, smiling. Yeah, that sounds good to me. The pair arrived at the train station and hopped on a train to take them back to the closest stop to their shared apartment complex. During the train ride, Midoriya reflected on his actions during the practical exam. I did everything I could, right? I couldn't dare call myself a hero if I abandoned someone who needed help and ignored a serious threat like the zero-pointer just for my own gain. But is 33 points enough? He inwardly sighed. Well, even if it isn't, I can at least hold my head up high. Fort Erskin, see, June 2042. Several minutes of terse silence passed before Army Colonel Phillips and USMC Corporal Yamamoto arrived at the Science Division and a door with Dr. Hatsum's name plaque blazoned on it. Without knocking on the door, Colonel Phillips swung the door open and stepped in with Peggy behind him. It's called knocking. Ever try it? The red-haired military scientist looked up from the papers she was reading over at her unorganized desk. Actually, her whole office was a mess with boxes of papers, books, and human anatomy scattered around. Oh, Colonel. And Corporal Yamamoto too. What do I owe this surprise visit to my office for? She asked cheerily, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Doctor, Phillips kept his voice even, we need to have a little talk. About? She cocked an eyebrow. That scrawny kid you allowed on my army base, the colonel answered bluntly. Cadet Midoriya? Yes. What about him? Colonel Phillips blinked in disbelief. How could she be so oblivious? That kid is a walking skeleton. Why would you waste one of our program's 13 spots on him? I have my reasons. Teruko nonchalantly glanced back at her papers on her desk. Reasons that I don't need to explain to you, Colonel. Dr. Hatsum dash. She interrupted him. I seem to recall having full autonomy in choosing cadets whoever I deem suitable for the project. Gone was Teruko's usual cheerful voice, replaced with a serious tone. I have final say in who gets selected, not you? Yes, but I am still the director of this program, Doctor, the colonel fired back. And I don't believe Cadet Midoriya is suited for the AMP. He turned to Peggy. April, back me up? Like the colonel said, Cadet Midoriya is not physically fit enough to endure the 10-week training camp. Peggy evenly stated, feeling a twinge in her chest. She hated to belittle her best friend in any way, but this was something that needed to be done for his own sake. I believe it's best for him to be medically discharged from the SSR and the military altogether. I'm so sorry, Izuku-kun. I know you wanted a chance, but this is way out of your depth. Peggy sadly thought. Well said. Colonel Phillips nodded in satisfaction. Corporal Yamamoto is in charge of the cadets' training regimen. If she believes that Cadet Midoriya can't cut it, then it's best to cut ties now. No point in prolonging this little experiment. Dr. Hatsum didn't respond immediately. Neither of you are wrong about Midoriya's physical limitations. That much is clear. However, physicality isn't the only trait I look for in suitable candidates. In fact, it's the least important. I don't understand. Colonel Phillips was clueless. This woman just didn't make sense to him. Teruko paused momentarily as if to collect her thoughts before looking back with a smirk. You're both right that Midoriya won't last 10 weeks the way he is now. She explained. So, I say let's go ahead and perform the procedure on him ASAP. The problem solved. Pardon, the colonel uncharacteristically stuttered. Peggy lightly gasped as her eyes shot open. No. She can't be serious. Doctor, with all due respect, that's insane. Peggy raised her voice. Agreed. The whole point of this training camp is to increase our cadet strengths before choosing the most suited for the procedure. Phillips added. Increase their base strength before multiplying it. Isn't that how you described it? Yes, initially. That was the plan. But Teruko smiled wistfully. Cadet Midoriya, someone like him is too rare to just toss aside. Colonel Phillips blinked in bewilderment while Peggy remained silent, processing Teruko's words. I'll tell you what, she looked back at the duo with a knowing smirk, I'll throw you a bone. You don't believe Cadet Midoriya is suited? Very well. You'll have 10 days to prove that to me. Excuse me, the colonel furrowed his brows. 10 days? Teruko repeated. If by 10 days Midoriya quits or proves he's unworthy, then I'll drop him from the program immediately. She laid out. But if he doesn't, he'll undergo the procedure immediately afterward. Sounds like a good deal, right? Neither Phillips nor Peggy responded immediately. Phillips was flummoxed over Teruko's suggestion while Peggy struggled to contain her growing ire. The colonel closed his eyes, sighing deeply in exasperation. This is a waste of time, but fine. He reopened his eyes to shoot her a serious expression. I'll play along with your little game, Doctor. See, Colonel? Peggy whipped her head to the army man in shock. Why, you can't be serious? My hands are tied. I can't go against her. She's far too valuable for the SSR and the military in general, especially after what the Marines did to rescue her from those maniacs in Japan. Phillips rationalized. Still though? On one condition, he continued. If that kid doesn't last through 10 days, then I'll get to decide the next cadet to take his place and who gets selected first. Can you agree to that, Doctor? If Teruko was fazed by the colonel's counteroffer, she didn't let it outwardly show. She grinned roguishly and held out her hand. I can agree to that, Colonel. Colonel Phillips and Dr. Hatsum promptly shook hands while Peggy was left in the middle, looking dumbfounded. What in the world just happened? Then there's nothing left to be said. Phillips turned around before glancing over to Peggy. You should get to the training grounds soon, Corporal. Why, sir? She said absent-mindedly. By the way, Colonel Phillips, Teruko smiled slyly, those 10 days start right now. It's June 23rd. So, by this time at 1:30 p.m. on July 3rd, if Cadet Midoriya hasn't quit or performed any unworthy action, he will be selected. The elderly colonel nodded. Understood, Doctor. If you'll excuse me, Teruko stuck her tongue out, earning an annoyed grunt from the old man. With that, the army colonel walked out of the office and closed the door behind him. Both Japanese-American women were left in the room alone. Teruko went to grab more papers on her desk while glancing back at her desktop monitor. Shouldn't you be going somewhere, Corporal? Why? Peggy growled, a shadow cast over her eyes. Teruko glanced up at the ravenet. The Marine woman shot the military scientist with a fierce expression. Why are you doing this? Is this your way of getting back at me for turning down your offer? Teruko blinked twice in confusion. Her ringed eyes slightly widened as she deduced what Peggy was talking about. Oh, no. She turned her gaze back to her monitor nonchalantly. That has nothing to do with anything. Although, I did talk to the higher-ups about transferring you here to train cadets after that meeting. Yeah, I figured that part out and I was fine with it. But this, she clenched her fists tightly, going behind my back and recruiting Izukuin to be your guinea pig? It's too much. Corporal Dash. Why did you pick him? She shouted out, not caring if anyone overheard them. You know he's too weak to be in the military. He'll die in boot camp. If it wasn't to spite me, then why? Teruko was silent. Her lips straightened as she stared at Peggy with an even expression. If you're truly his best friend, then you should know that already. Peggy blinked, confused. What? Teruko turned away, smirking. I'm sure deep down you already know why I chose him. You're just being too overprotective to see it right now. But I don't. She stammered. I'm sure you'll fully realize it before the 10 days are up, Teruko said, turning her attention back to her computer. Well, I have work to do and so do you apparently. Better get to it, Corporal. Yes. Peggy turned and proceeded. But we're not finished with this yet, Teruko. Oh, I know. Also, she shot Peggy a cheeky grin. Don't go too hard on Izukuin in training, or too easy either. You don't want to turn the platoon against him right off the bat, do you? First, don't tell me how to do my job. Second, she glared back, don't call him that again. Oh, is that the nickname that only you can call him by? You're such a tsundere, Peg-chan. She mocked. Shut up. Peggy felt her face get a tad warmer. With that, Peggy slammed the door shut before stomping off down the hall, the veins on her temple throbbing. Teruko, meanwhile, sighed loudly. This is gonna be an interesting 10 days for sure. Mizudafu, Japan, March 2197. Over a week has passed since completing UA University's Hero Department entrance exam. Midoriya continued with his regular routine of attending his college courses, which he would be completing within a couple of weeks, physical training, and trying to check more items off his things to catch up on notebook. He still wasn't making much progress on that last one considering the list kept growing by the day. He had kept himself busier than usual to keep his mind from fretting over the exam results. The stress headaches and restless sleep that would occur from it was not worth it. After all, he already had his own pre-existing issues he needed to work through. Midoriya had noticed that Yagi hadn't contacted him since the day of the exam, and any attempt to reach out to him on his end was met with zero results. He wasn't upset, though. He imagined Yagi was likely busy tallying the scores for all the examinees with the rest of UA's Hero Department staff. He didn't envy that job. Despite his best efforts, Midoriya would be lying if he said he wasn't starting to feel anxious. The suspense was taking its toll. Then, the day came when a letter from UA finally came in the mailbox slot. Uraraka had received hers as well, and the pair were now preparing to open them in their respective apartments. Sitting at his desk in a white tank top and gray jogging pants, he let out a deep exhale before carefully opening the letter. Instead of a letter, a small disc fell out and landed on his desk. It immediately lit up, projecting the face of the world's most famous hero with his trademark smile. I am here as a projection. All might. Midoriya blinked, confused. UA can afford to send examinees hologram projectors? This school has way too much money. I had to do some paperwork that took quite a bit of time, and I had to record all these videos for all examinees, so I wasn't able to contact you. He stopped to look around, as if he were making sure no one was watching him. Also, I recorded your message last while the director was out of the room so I could talk more freely with you, Captain. Midoriya nodded in understanding, already suspecting he was too busy to respond. First things first, you passed the written exam with flying colors, a 95% score. All your time studying on your own and with your two new friends certainly paid off. Well done. Midoriya smiled, feeling hope blossom in his chest. So far so good. Now, onto the practical exam. The screen then switched to show Midoriya in a sprinter's stance at the entrance of the battle arena. You started off strong. While your fellow examinees were left startled by the suddenness of the start, you were off the line and closing in on your first target. Going for the high ground to survey your surroundings while using your shield to take out enemies from afar, limiting potential damage to yourself, was a stroke of genius. The stamina you displayed constantly jumping across rooftops in search of targets is a testament to your own hard work and training. Midoriya couldn't help but smile at All Might's praise. However, he then winced, suspecting he knew what was coming next. While you made excellent progress during most of the test, you started scoring less villain points near the end. You even dedicated your last 2 minutes to disabling the zero-pointer, hamstringing yourself and your final score. And I don't regret that either. Midoriya inwardly declared, knowing he did the right thing. Tsunatori-san could have died, and the other examinees were endangered. I had to act. I'm sorry, young Midoriya, but I'm afraid you didn't earn enough villain points during the practical. 39 just isn't enough, even with your impressive written exam. All Might's projection frowned. Midoriya sighed and lowered his head, disappointed. I feared that would be the case. He knew what would happen now. With him unable to keep his end of the arrangement, S.H.I.E.L.D. would certainly call him back to the States. There, they would likely want to train him themselves and eventually grant him authority to work in the underground hero field as one of their agents, or just do their dirty work. Neither option appealed to him. He didn't know why exactly, but there was just something about S.H.I.E.L.D. that kept him from fully trusting them. Maybe it was because they were a global espionage organization built on telling lies to the masses and covering up shady, most likely illegal, acts? That may have something to do with it. Regardless, he knew his time in Japan was finished, which meant, All Might, I wasted your time with all that training. Forgive me. Uraraka-chan, Yamamo. I'm sorry. He then remembered a scene from one of their past study sessions together a couple months ago. Hey, all three of us are aiming to get into UA's hero course, right? Uraraka stated rather than asked. That we are. Yaoyorozu nodded, looking slightly bemused. I believe we already established that fact before though, Uraraka? I know, but I was thinking we should make a promise to each other. A promise, huh? Midoriya questioned, cocking a brow. Yeah. I want all of us to get in. Don't you? Absolutely. Yaoyorozu agreed. Obviously. Midoriya nodded. Well, let's all work super hard to pass the exams and get into UA together. That should give us all the extra motivation we need, right? She then held out the top of her hand. What do you say? Yaoyorozu smiled brightly and placed her hand on top of Uraraka's hand. Very well. I promise I'll do my absolute best to earn my acceptance. Midoriya? Uraraka and Yaoyorozu both looked expectantly at him. Looking between them and their hands, he smiled determinedly. Yeah. He placed his hand on theirs, ignoring their softness. I promise to give it all I got too. Yaoyorozu and Uraraka both matched his determination. I look forward to seeing you both at UA. Midoriya grinned. Midoriya closed his eyes, covering his face with his right hand. I'm sorry I couldn't keep our promise, but I know you both will become great heroes without me anyway. He hated letting people down. It was a horrible feeling. I'll be rooting for you from overseas. The super soldier could have sworn he felt something wet in his eyes. Allergies, perhaps? Oh wait, he didn't have allergic reactions anymore, nor did he get sick either. Tears? Yep, they were tears. Mission failed. He mumbled dejectedly. If that were all to the test, that is. Midoriya looked back up. Sorry to lead you on, Captain, but I am also an entertainer. You see, this test was not graded by villain points alone. He blinked. What? The image changed to show Midoriya rescuing Tsunatori from under the rubble and safely carrying her down the street away from the zero-pointer. It then shifted to show him climbing up the zero-pointer and the massive robot collapsing to the ground, deactivated. When the zero-pointer attacked and an examinee was trapped, you didn't hesitate to rush in and save her. Even after rescuing young Tsunatori, you were still worried for the safety of everyone else. So much so that you took it upon yourself to protect them by stopping the threat, even at the cost of impeding your own score. All Might took center stage again. How can a school for heroes not consider the actions of people who demonstrate true heroism, even at the cost of themselves. Some may call that lip service. But you see, this is a job that requires risking one's life to put that lip service into practice. That is why we have rescue points. Awarded to you by a panel of judges. All Might exclaimed. An image of the top 10 exam scores then appeared on screen. Midoriya Izuku, 39 villain points and 60 rescue points for 99 points total. Not only did you pass, but first place is yours. All Might appeared again. Even though you have achieved so much and have much notoriety in your name alone even today, you've never hung your hat on it, nor are you too proud to admit that there is always room for improvement. You truly live up to the legend, old man. Midoriya rolled his eyes, smirking playfully. I'll get him back for that. All Might respectfully bowed, holding out his hand to the screen. Captain America, it is my honor, privilege, and joy to welcome you to UA University, your first step into modern heroics, your hero academia. With that, the projection finally cut off. Midoriya didn't immediately react. He simply sat in his chair frozen for what seemed to be hours. I did it. I did it. He couldn't believe it. Just when his hopes had been dashed, they were suddenly reignited into a blaze. I really did it? Rapid banging at the door suddenly snapped Midoriya out of his stupor. Midori-kun. Midori-kun. Uraraka-chan. Midoriya immediately stood up from his desk and opened the door. Uraraka was standing at his door in a pair of black pajama pants with pink and white stars and planets and a white nightshirt with 13 on the front. Her chestnut hair was let all the way down to her shoulder blades. Normally, he'd be blushing at her state of attire, but he was still shell-shocked from his acceptance message to fully register it. I got in. She blurted out. That's right. His eyes widened. I remember seeing her name on the list too. She got 85 points, which means dash. Uraraka, see congratulation, he stammered out. You got second place. That's awesome. Midori-kun. Her eyes brightened. You got first place. That's so amazing. You're amazing. This time, Midoriya did blush mightily. They think that's an over... He didn't complete his sentence as Uraraka ran and hugged him tightly, burying her face into his chest. Midoriya's face somehow became even redder, his head now strongly resembling a tomato. She feels so soft. Her chest is nice too? Stop. He tried to shake those inappropriate thoughts from his mind. Knock it off, soldier. Control yourself. The sounds of sniffling interrupted Midoriya's panicked musings. He looked down, seeing tears brimming in Uraraka's eyes. Midori-kun, I got the scholarship? That's right. She was really studying and training hard for that. UA University offered full scholarships to any Hero Corps students who scored in the top 3 of the entrance exam. Uraraka-chan is tight on cash, so getting that scholarship is a big deal for her and her folks. Wait, that also meant he earned a scholarship as well. That's cool. I'm so happy for you, Uraraka-chan. Midoriya carefully placed his hands on her shoulders. You worked so hard for it. Uraraka sniffled, tightening her grip on his tank top. Thank you. I couldn't have done it without you and Yamamo. She continued to cry, soaking his shirt with her happy tears. Midoriya decided to let her be. She needed to let it all out. Despite his own embarrassment, he returned her tight embrace with a gentle hug. Dr. Hatsum. Bucky. I did it. Midoriya felt his own tears return as well, only this time, they were happy ones. He glanced over to his shield case leaning up against his desk. Looks like my journey has only just begun.